Good morning. Good morning, guys. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I think it's because it's off weekend, so people are probably still sleeping in. Maybe I should have done it at 12. I don't know. But, anyways. Good morning. We are gonna finish up Sanshiro today by NatsumeSōseki. The next week, Monday, we are gonna start a new book, okay? So, today's mission, finish up Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. Hello, if you guys are in my stream right now, please wave, say hello, do an emoji, an emoticon, let me know that you're there. If there's nothing, okay. Usually I do a little chit chat in the beginning of my stream, but since today there's nobody here, I'm just gonna straight away start the reading session, okay? I woke up really early today. It's a miracle. I had my coffee, I had my breakfast. I'm not chewing on my bagel today. A very cool, chill morning that I had. I even made matcha tea. I'm like super stoked up, like on caffeine right now, and I'm still drinking green tea. It's like my whole morning and day is just coffee, matcha, sencha, and just everything. I just drink everything. That gives me the boost that I need. Anyway, been experimenting with like timing. 11:30 a.m. seems to be, I don't know, I can't tell. Sometimes people come in early in the morning, sometimes people don't. 11:30 seems to be a good time, but then it also drag on for me until until 3 p.m. or so for me, for my reading. So I tend to get like really tired in the midst of it because I don't have my lunch yet, and also yeah, I'm just like, I just don't feel that bad right now because I don't have that much work compared to last month. But yeah, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine if I have to like do this when I have like a ton of work waiting for me to do, you know. But anyways, I think I should stop rambling and start reading. Okay, girls, boys, ladies and gentlemen, today, we are reading. We are gonna finish up Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. Starting from chapter 9 to chapter 13. We got a bit to go, but I just took a sip of my green tea, and we shall start now. So, also in the last reading session of the chapter 8, basically Sanshiro had to, it's a very complicated thing that he had to go and get the money that he lent to Yoshiro from Mineko, and so he went to meet with Mineko, and Mineko was just being a bit weird, like you can't really tell whether Mineko really likes him or not. And we are, as a reader, we are also being put into that situation because we have Sanshiro's point of view. We don't have Mineko's point of view. So as a reader, you also feel like Sanshiro. Like, does she like me? Like, does she like Sanshiro at all? Or she's just playing with him, you know? But I don't know. But the female characters in NatsumeSōseki's book are all very dignified, very good women, well written for the time that he was writing in. So anyway, I'm babbling again. Let us start with chapter 9, Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. Please let me know if I am reading too softly and if there's anything I can do to make the sound less loud. I already put it quite low, so the background sound, I mean. Alright, let us start. Chapter 9 Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. Sanshiro went to the Seiyoken dinner after much prodding from Yojiro. He wore traditional formal attire that included a black coat of fine raw silk. A letter from his mother explained the making of the coat in great detail. Miwata Omitsu's mother wove the material, and after they had dyed it with the Ogawa family crest, Omitsu did the sewing. He tried it on when the package arrived, but reluctant to wear the Miwata lady's handiwork, he had left it in the drawer ever since. This was a great waste, according to Yojiro, who badgered Sanshiro to wear it to the dinner, as though he might wear the coat himself if Sanshiro did not. Once Sanshiro relented and tried it on, the coat did not seem so bad. Sanshiro stood in the doorway of the Seiyoken with Yojiro, dressed in this outfit. It was the proper outfit for receiving guests, Yojiro said. Sanshiro had not been expecting to receive guests, however. He had assumed that he himself was a guest. Now he felt like an overdressed doorman. He was sorry he had not worn his student uniform. The guests began to arrive. Yojiro buttonholed each of them in turn, treating them all like old friends. After each new arrival handed his hat and coat to the valet and passed by the broad flight of stairs to turn into the dark corridor, Yojiro would identify him for Sanshiro. In this way, Sanshiro came to know the faces of many eminent men. Before long, all the guests had arrived. They numbered close to 30. Professor Hirota was there. So was Nonomiya, a scientist to be sure, but fond of art and literature, and therefore, according to Yojiro, forced to attend by Haraguchi. Haraguchi himself was there. He had arrived first of all and proceeded to circulate officiously among the guests, exuding charm and fondling his beard. Soon it was time to be seated. Each man sat where he liked, no one yielding, no one contesting his place. Out of keeping his usual slowness, Professor Hirota was the first one to take the table. Only Yojiro and Sanshiro intentionally sat together, taking seats near the doorway. All the others found the neighbors by chance. A critic in a striped formal coat sat between Nonomiya and Professor Hirota. Across the table was one Dr. Shoji, Yojiro's influential professor in the Department of Literature. He wore a frock coat and was a man of some dignity. His hair, which he wore at more than twice the normal length, seemed to swirl in black eddies beneath the electric lamps, a remarkable contrast to Professor Hirota's close-cropped monk's cut. Haraguchi sat at the far corner, which placed him across from Sanshiro down the length of the table. He wore a suit and had a broad tie of black satin knotted at the collar, and with the ends splayed out across his chest. Yojiro informed Sanshiro that French artists wore that kind of necktie. It looked just like the knot in a man's sash. Sanshiro thought to himself as he sipped spoonfuls of soup. Oh my god, I'm fucking up, sorry. Soon the conversation started. Yojiro uncharacteristically quiet, concentrated on his beer. This was an occasion when even he had to practice some restraint, apparently. How about a little ditty fabula? Sanshiro suggested under his breath. Not today, Yojiro answered, turning away to start up a conversation with the man next to him. He complimented the man on the certain essay and said how much he had benefited from it. This struck Sanshiro as strange because in his presence Yojiro had torn the thing apart. Yojiro turned back to Sanshiro. That's a handsome coat. It really becomes you, he said, looking at the white family crest in particular. Just then, Haraguchi began to address Nonomiya from his far corner. His loud voice served him well in the distant exchange. Professor Hirota and Dr. Soji, fearing lest their cross-table conversation interfere with the other dialogue, cut their own discussion short. Everyone fell silent too. The gathering had a focal point now for the first time. Nonomiya, have you completed your experiment on the pressure of light? No, far from it. It's real drudgery, isn't it? We artists have to work hard, but yours seem even more strenuous. All an artist needs to do is to paint a picture. All an artist needs to paint a picture is inspiration, Nonomiya said, using the English term. It is not easy when you experiment in physics. Inspiration? Now, that's a word that makes me cringe. This summer, I heard two old women engaged in a dialogue. They were sharing their research into whether or not the rainy season had ended. The first one complaining that in the old days a good clap of thunder was sure to end the rainy season, but that thunder didn't work anymore. This made the other one mad. She said, "What are you talking about? A little thunder? A little thunder's not going to do it." Well, that's how it is in painting nowadays. A little inspiration is not going to do it. What do you say, Tamura? It must be the same for a writer. A novelist called Tamura was sitting next to Haraguchi. My only inspiration comes from the editors when they hound me for a manuscript, he answered, which drew a big laugh. Then Tamura became serious and started asking Nonomiya about his work. Does light have pressure? If so, how does one experiment on it? Nonomiya's answers were very interesting. You make a thin disc about an inch in diameter from mica or some such material, hang it from a quartz thread in a vacuum, and shine the beam of an arc lamp at the surface of the disc at the right angle. Pushed by the beam, the disc moves. Everyone at the table was listening intently. Sanshiro recalled the time when he had arrived in Tokyo and had been so startled by the view through the telescope. The view of that tin can which must have contained the device he was hearing about just now. Yojiro, he whispered, is there such a thing about quartz thread? Yojiro shook his head. Then Sanshiro asked Nonomiya, is there such a thing as quartz thread? Yes. First, you must melt powdered quartz in the flame of an oxyhydrogen blowpipe, then stretch it to the right and left with both hands until a fine thread forms. Sanshiro said only, "Oh," and retreated. The critic, in a striped coat sitting beside Nonomiya, was the next to speak up. We are entirely ignorant when it comes to these things, but what I would like to know is how you became aware of the problem in the first place. It has been a matter of theoretical conjecture since Maxwell, but Lebedev was the first to prove it through experimentation. Now, it's reached the stage where someone is using the idea to explain the behavior of comets. The tail ought to be drawn towards the sun, but they are always bent the other way. Perhaps it's because of light pressure blows them back. The critic seems greatly impressed. The idea itself is interesting, I suppose, but what I like about it is that it's big. It's not only big, said Professor Hirota, it's fun because it's harmless. And if the idea is wrong, it's even more harmless, Haraguchi said with a laugh. No, I'm afraid that's right. The pressure of light is proportionate to the square of the radius, but gravity is proportionate to the cube of the radius, so the smaller the thing is, the less its gravitational pull, and the stronger the effect of light pressure in it. If we assume the tail of a comet to be composed of tiny particles, it will obviously have to be blown back from the sun. Nonomiya had turned serious, but Haraguchi went on as before. Now, we are paying for the harmlessness with all this calculating. You can't win. This remark restored the beery mood for everyone. Professor Hirota said, "It looks to me as though a writer of the unnaturalist school could never be a physicist." The pairing of physicists with the dominant literary movement excited everyone's interest to no small degree. "What do you mean by that?" asked Nomiya, the man most directly concerned. Now Hirota had to explain himself. "Well, look, it won't do you any good just to open your eyes and observe nature if you want to test the pressure of light. I don't see where this fact, the pressure of light, is printed anywhere on nature's menu, do you? You have to go about it artificially with quartz threads and vacuums and mica and all these devices so that the pressure becomes visible to the eye of the physicist. In other words, physicists are not naturalists, but they're not romantics either," Haraguchi butted in. "Oh yes, they are," Hirota defended himself grandly. "To place the light and the thing that receives the light in a spatial relationship that cannot be found in the normal natural world is something only romantic would do. But only you have put them into that spatial relationship," Nonomiya said. "All you do is observe the light's characteristic pressure, and that much belongs to the naturalist school." "Then physicists are romantic naturalists," said Dr. Shoji, sitting diagonally opposite Nonomiya, and he offered comparison. "In literature, that would be someone like Ibsen, I suppose." "True," said the critic in the striped coat. "Ibsen has as many devices as Nonomiya, but I doubt if his characters follow natural laws the way light does." "That's a good point," Professor Hirota said. "But there is one thing we ought to keep in mind in the study of man, namely that a human being placed in particular circumstances had the ability and the right to do just the opposite of what circumstances dictate. The trouble is we have this odd habit of thinking that man and light both act accordingly to mechanical laws, which leads to some stunning errors. We set things up to make man angry, and he laughs. We try to make him laugh, and again he does the opposite. He gets angry. Either way, though, he's still a human being." Hirota had enlarged the scope of problem again. "Well then, what you're saying is no matter what a human being does in a particular set of circumstances, he is being natural, and the novelist at the far end of the table." "That's it," Hirota shot back. "It seems to me that you might create any sort of character in a novel, and there would be at least one person in the world just like him. We humans are simply incapable of imagining non-human actions and or behavior. It is the writer's fault if we don't believe in his characters as human beings." The novelist had nothing to say to this. Now it was Dr. Shoji's turn to speak. "Look at the physicist. Galileo realized that one swing of the lamp in the cathedral took the same time no matter how big the swing. Newton discovered that apple fell because of gravity. Men like that are dyed-in-the-wool members of the naturalist school." "If that's what the naturalist school is, I suppose it's all right for literature to have one," Nonomiya said. "Haraguchi, is there a naturalist school of painters?" "Of course. There was this frightening fellow Courbet, verite ver. He accepted only fact, not that his ideas ran rampant over everything. They were simply recognized as one particular school, which is how it ought to be. It's probably the same with fiction. Isn't that so, Tamura? There must be some writers who prefer symbolism and idealism, men like Moreau or Chavans." "There must be," said the novelist beside him. No one rose to make an after-dinner speech. Only Haraguchi had anything to say. He was intent on criticizing the bronze figure on top of Gudan. What a terrible thing to inflict on the citizens of Tokyo. How much smarter would it be to put up a bronze image of a beautiful geisha? Yojiro told Sanshiro that Haraguchi did not get along well with the sculptor of the Gudan piece. The party ended. Outside, the moon was beautiful. Yojiro asked Sanshiro if he thought Professor Hirota had made a good impression on Dr. Shoji. Sanshiro answered and that he probably had. Stopping next to the public water tap, Yojiro mentioned that he had come here for a walk this summer. Feeling the heat, he was washing himself off when a policeman spotted him and he ran up to Suribachi Hill. Now the two of them climbed Suribachi Hill to look at the moon. On the way home, Yojiro began to make excuse about the money he owed Sanshiro. But on this fairly cold night with a clear moon in the sky, money was the farthest thing from Sanshiro's mind. He could not listen seriously. In any case, he thought Yojiro was not going to give it back. Giving it back was one thing that Yojiro failed to mention. He concentrated instead on all the reasons why he was unable to do so. More than what he had to say, however, it was his style that interested Sanshiro. Yojiro knew a man who disappointed in love and had grown tired of living and finally resolved to kill himself. He found drowning unpalatable. Throwing himself into a volcano even worse, and hanging worst of all. So he bought a gun. Before he had a chance to use it though, a friend came to him for a loan. Having no money himself, he turned the friend down, but the man pleaded for help. All he could do was lend him the gun. The friend pawned it and kept himself going. When he had the money again, he redeemed the gun and brought it back. This time, however, the owner of the gun no longer felt like dying. In other words, his life had been saved because someone had come for him for a loan. So you see what can happen, Yojiro concluded. To Sanshiro, it was just a funny story, nothing more. He looked up at the moon and roared with laughter. It didn't matter that Yojiro would not return the money. He felt good. Hey, it's not funny, Yojiro objected. This made Sanshiro laugh all the more. Stop laughing and think about it. You got to borrow the money from Mineko only because I didn't pay it back to you. Welcome, please take a seat. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you so much. We are currently reading chapter 9 of Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. Sanshiro stopped laughing. So what? So plenty. You're in love with her, aren't you? Yojiro knew. Sanshiro grunted and looked up at the moon again. Now there was a white cloud next to it. Have you paid her back? No, I have not. Do her a favor. Don't ever pay her back. Yojiro was so offhand about it. Sanshiro did not answer him. But of course, he had no intention of following Yojiro's advice. In fact, after paying 20 yen for his room board, he decided to bring the extra 10 yen to her the next day and carried it as far as her front gate, but had second thoughts. If he repaid it immediately, it occurred to him that that would be like rejecting her kindness, and he turned back, even if it meant sacrificing an excellent chance to visit her again. At that point, something had caused his determination to slacken, and he had broken into the 10 yen. Tonight's dinner had come from it, in fact, and not just his own meal, but Yojiro's too. He only had 2 or 3 yen left, and with that, he was planning to buy a winter undershirt. But Sanshiro had made his move some days ago, concluding that Yojiro would never pay him back. He had written home to request an extra 30 yen. What with the liberal monthly allowance he was receiving, it would not have been enough to say only that he had run short. Never much of a liar, Sanshiro had been hard put to think of a reason for his request. All he could do was explain to his mother that out of pity, he had made a loan to a friend who had somehow lost the money and was in a bind. As a result, he himself was now in a bind. Would she please send it? Had she answered promptly, her letter would have arrived before. Perhaps he would find it in his room tonight. To be sure, an envelope addressed to his mother's handwriting was waiting on his desk. All of her previous letters had come registered mail, but this one, oddly enough, had arrived bearing an ordinary 3 cent stamp. He opened it to find a brief note of a kind she had never written before. It was strictly businesslike, which, from his mother, was almost cruel. She had sent the money to Nonomiya's, she said. He should pick it up there. Sanshiro spread out his bedding and went to sleep. He didn't go to Nonomiya's the next day or the day after that, nor did he hear anything from Nonomiya. A week went by like this. Finally, a maid from Nonomiya's rooming's house came with a note. I have something for you from your mother. Come over, it said. Between classes, Sanshiro descended once again into the cellar of the science building. He hoped to end the matter in the course of a quick chat, but it did not work out that way. In the room that Nonomiya had occupied alone this summer, there were several men with mustaches and several uniformed students. All were pursuing their research with silent intensity, ignoring the sunlit world above their head. Nonomiya looked busiest of all, glancing at Sanshiro, who had stuck his head in through the doorway. He approached without a word. Some money came for you from home. Come and get it, will you? I don't have it here, and there's something I have to talk to you about. Would tonight be all right? Sanshiro asked. After giving it some thought, Nonomiya said that it would. Sanshiro left the cellar. As he was going out, he felt a surge of admiration for the great tenacity of scientists. The tin can and the telescope he had seen that summer were standing in the same place. He saw Yojiro during the next lecture and told him what happened. Yojiro stared at him incredulously. I told you not to pay her back. You didn't have to write home. Now your poor mother is worried and Sohachi's going to lecture you. What stupidity! Yojiro gave no sign of recognition that he had started it all. Sanshiro, too, had forgotten Yojiro's responsibility in the matter. His reply thus carried no hint of blame for Yojiro. I wrote home because I don't like the idea of not paying her back. You might not like it, but Mineko would. Why should she? His own question rang somewhat false to Sanshiro, but it had no discernible effect on Yojiro. Why shouldn't she? Why shouldn't I? Suppose I got some extra money, I would feel better by just letting you keep it than making you pay it back. People like to be kind to other people, as long as they're not put out by it themselves. Instead of answering him, Sanshiro began taking lecture notes. After he had written a few lines, Yojiro leaned over to him and whispered, Even I have often lent people money that when I have had it, and not one of them ever paid me back. That's why I'm so much fun to be with. Sanshiro could hardly favor him with a serious reply. After producing a faint smile, he continued moving his pen. Yojiro had settled down and kept his mouth shut until the end of the hour. The bell rang, and as the two were walking from the lecture hall side by side, Yojiro suddenly asked, Has she fallen for you? The other students came crowding out behind them. Sanshiro was forced to keep silent as they went down the stairs and out of the side door to the open space beside the library. Only then he turned to Yojiro. I don't know, he said. Yojiro stood looking at Sanshiro for a while. I suppose it's possible not to know, he said. But even if you did know for a certain, could you ever be her husband? He used the English word. Sanshiro never ever considered this before. It had seemed to him that being loved by Mineko was the only qualification a man needed to be her husband. Now that it had been put to him like this, he had some doubts. He cocked his head to one side. Nonomiya could, I'm sure, Yojiro said. Is there something between Nonomiya and her? Sanshiro's face looked as solemn as it had been chiseled in stone. I don't know, Sanshiro said. Nothing. Anyhow, go get your lecture at Nonomiya's. Yojiro flung the words at him and started off towards the pond. Sanshiro stood rooted to the spot. like a signboard advertising his own stupidity. Yojiro took 5 or 6 paces and came back smiling. Why don't you marry Yoshiko instead? He dragged Sanshiro away in the direction of the pond, declaring, That's it! That's it! Soon the bell rang. Sanshiro left his rooming house for Nonomiya's that evening. It was still early, so he strolled over to Yonchome to buy a woolen undershirt at a big import goods store there. The shop boy brought out several different kinds there. Oh my god, I'm sorry. The shop boy brought out several different kinds. These Sanshiro stroked and patted, folded and unfolded without settling on one to buy. He was affecting a lordly air for no good reason when Mineko and Yoshiko happened along in search of perfume. After the initial surprise and greetings, Mineko added a brief expression of thanks to him. She said nothing specific, but Sanshiro knew precisely what she was referring to. The day after he had borrowed the money, Sanshiro had postponed visiting her again to return the extra 10 yen. Instead, after waiting 2 more days, had written her a polite thank you note. The letter was an honest expression of the writer's immediate feeling, but of course it was overwritten. Stringing together all the appropriate phrases he could think of, Sanshiro had given a passionate voice to his gratitude. Such steam rose from its pages that an innocent bystander could hardly have guessed it to a letter of thanks for a loan. Aside from its words of gratitude, however, it had nothing to say, and thus, in the natural course of things, gratitude perhaps turned into something more. When Sanshiro dropped his letter into the mailbox, he looked forward to an immediate reply, but his painstakingly wrought epistle went its way to no avail. There had been no opportunity for him to see Mineko until today, and now he could not find it in him to respond to her feeble thank you. He held out a large undershirt in both hands and stared at it, wondering if Mineko's coolness could be explained by Yoshiko's presence. It also occurred to him that he was buying this shirt with her money. The shop boy was pressing him for a decision. The 2 young women approached, smiling, and helped him with the undershirts. Finally, Yoshiko said, Take this one. Sanshiro took that one. Next to it was his turn to advise them on perfume, about which he knew nothing. At random, he picked up a bottle labeled in English, Heliotrope, and asked, How about this? Mineko took it immediately. He was sorry. He had done that. Outside, as he was about to leave them, the women started bowing to each other. I'll see you later, Yoshiko said. Don't be long, Mineko answered. Yoshiko told him she was on her way to Nonomiya's. This was to be Sanshiro's second twilight stroll with a pretty woman, this time to his own Oiwake neighborhood. The sun was still far from setting. Sanshiro felt somewhat annoyed not to be walking with Yoshiko, but because she had to go to Nonomiya's with her, he considered returning home and trying it another time. On second thought, though, it might be more convenient to have Yoshiko there for the lecture Yojiro had predicted. Certainly, Nonomiya would not be able to deliver a full-blown reprimand from his mother in someone else's presence. Sanshiro might even get away with just picking up the money. A bit of a cunning entered into his resolve. I was on my way to your brother's myself. Oh? Are you going to drop in on him? No, there's something I have to see him about. And you? I have something too. They asked the same questions and received the same answer. Neither showed any signs of being inconvenienced. As a final precaution, Sanshiro asked if he would be in the way. She replied that he would not at all be in the way. Not only did her words negate his suggestion, her face showed surprise, as if to say, How could you ask such a question? Sanshiro thought he saw this surprise in her black eyes by the light of a gas lamp from a shop they were passing by, but in fact, the eyes were merely big and black. Did you buy a violin? How did you know that? Sanshiro was hard-pressed for an answer. Unconcerned, Yoshiko went right on. It did me no good to beg. Sohachi just kept making promises. It took him forever. Inwardly, Sanshiro blamed neither Nonomiya nor Hirota but Yojiro. The two of them turned off Oiwake's main street into a narrow lane. There were many houses. An oil lamp at each door provided light for the dark alley. Sanshiro and Yoshiko came to a stop in front of one of the lamps. Nonomiya lived at the back of this house. Nonomiya's new lodgings were only a block or so from Sanshiro's. Sanshiro had visited Nonomiya here 2 or 3 times. The scientist lived in a detached 2-room cottage that was approached by walking through the main house at the end of a broad corridor, climbing 2 steps straight ahead and turning into the left. A spacious neighboring garden came almost to his southern veranda. The place was extraordinarily quiet both day and night. Sanshiro had been much impressed the first time he saw Nonomiya secluded in his private cottage. No, this return to rooming life was not a bad idea at all. That day, Nonomiya had stepped down to the corridor and gestured towards towards the eaves. "Look," he said, "a thatched roof." It was probably one of the few non-tiled roofs left in Tokyo. About this time, Sanshiro was here at night. He could not see the roof, but modern electric lights were burning inside. He thought of the rustic thatch as soon as he caught sight of the lights, and the contrast seems amusing to him. "What an unusual pair of guests! Did you just happen to meet outside?" Nonomiya asked Yoshiko. She corrected his mistaken assumption and added that he ought to buy an undershirt like Sanshiro's. Then she complained that the tone of a new Japanese-made violin was no good. He had put off buying it for so long, he ought to exchange it for a better one, at least as good as Mineko's. She would content herself with that. She went on whining like this for some time. Nonomiya did not look especially displeased, but neither did he offer her any sympathy. He went on listening with an occasional "uh-huh." Sanshiro, meanwhile, said nothing. Yoshiko produced a string of absurdities without the least restraint, but to Sanshiro she seemed neither idiotic or selfish. As he listened to the dialogue she carried on with her brother, he felt as though he had walked out to a broad, sunlit field. He forgot all about the lecture that was due him. Then suddenly, Yoshiko treated him to a shock. "Oh, Sohachi," she said to her brother, "I almost forgot. I have a message for you from Mineko." "Oh, don't act so cool about it. I know how happy it makes you." Nonomiya's face took on an itchy look. He turned to Sanshiro. "My sister's an idiot, you know." Sanshiro produced a dutiful smile. "I'm not an idiot, am I, Sanshiro?" He smiled again, but inside he was sick of smiling. "Mineko wants you to take her to one of the literary societies' drama's night." "Why doesn't she go with her brother? He's busy. Are you going to?" "Of course." Nonomiya turned to Sanshiro again without giving Yoshiko a definite answer. He had called to his sister here tonight on serious business, he said, but her pointless chatter was too much for him. Nonomiya went on with scholarly candor. There had been a proposal of marriage for Yoshiko. He had written to his parents, and they had expressed no objection. Now it became necessary to ascertain Yoshiko's own view of the matter. Sanshiro replied only that that was very fine. He wanted to settle his own problem and leave here as soon as possible. To that end, he said, "My mother tells me she troubled you with something for me." "Oh, it's no great trouble." He produced the item in his charge from a desk drawer and handed it to Sanshiro. "Your mother sent me a long letter. She's worried about you. She says that you told her you were forced to lend your monthly allowance to a friend, but friend or not, a person shouldn't borrow so freely, or at least ought to pay the loan back. I am not surprised you would think that. Country people are so simple and honest. She also blames you for overdoing it. Here you are, living on money from home, and you started lending people money. You started lending people 20 yen, 30 yen at a time. You ought to know better. The way she puts it, it sounds as if I'm somehow responsible." Nonomiya flashed a grin at Sanshiro, whose only response was a somber, "I am sorry about this." Nonomiya changed his tone somewhat, as if to imply that he had not been trying to set a young man straight. "Come now, don't let it bother you, it's nothing. Your mother thinks about money by what it's worth in the country. To her, 30 yen looks like a lot. She says a family of 4 could feed themselves for half a year on 30 yen. Can that be true?" Yoshiko burst out laughing. Sanshiro, too, could appreciate the comical side of his mother's letter, but she was by no means making this up. When she saw what a rash thing he had done, he felt a little sorry. "If that's the case," Nonomiya started counting, "it comes to 5 yen a month or 1 yen 20 cent for each person. Divided by 30, it's only about 4 cents a day. Come on, that's too little even in the country." "What do you have to eat to live so cheaply?" Yoshiko asked in all seriousness. Sanshiro had no time to be feeling sorry. He told them about life in his home village. One thing he mentioned was the local custom known as the shrine retreat. Once a year, Sanshiro's family donated 10 yen to the village. The 60 households sent 1 man each. The group of 60 would take the day off, gather in the village shrine, and eat and drink from morning till night. And that cost only 10 yen? Yoshiko was amazed. Nonomiya's lecture had apparently gone off somewhere. They talked at random for a while, after which Nonomiya returned to the main subject. "Anyhow, your mother said this. She wants me to find out what's going on, and once I have decided that everything is on the up and up, to give you the money. Finally, I suppose to report back to her on what I find. But here I have given you the money without asking a thing. Let's see now. You lent the money to Sasaki, didn't you?" Sanshiro assumed the story had gone from Mineko through Yoshiko to Nonomiya. He felt it odd, however, that neither Yoshiko nor Nonomiya had realized how the money had changed hands many times until it took shape as a violin. "Yes," he answered, and let it go at that. "I heard that Sasaki lost the money on the horses." "True?" Yoshiko laughed out loud again. "Well then, I'll think of something to tell your mother, but you had better not make any more of those loans." Sanshiro replied that he would not. He said goodbye and was getting to his feet when Yoshiko announced that she would be leaving too. "We haven't had our talk yet," her brother reminded her. "That's quite alright," she declared. "It is not alright." "Yes, it is, I just don't know." Nonomiya stared at his sister. She continued, "Don't you see how pointless it is? What can I say when you ask me if I'll marry a total stranger? I don't love him. I don't hate him. I don't know him. Literally, I just don't know." Sanshiro now saw what Yoshiko meant by "I just don't know." He left the brother and sister alone and hurried outside. He emerged from the deserted lane, where door lamps were all that illuminated darkness. On the main street again, he found the wind blowing, and when he turned north, it struck him full in the face. The wind blew from the direction of his lodgings into rhythmic gusts. Sanshiro thought to himself, "Through this wind, Nonomiya will be walking soon, accompanying his sister back to Satomi's." He could hear the wind even after he had climbed up the stairs to his room and sat down on the matted floor. The word destiny came to his mind whenever he heard the wind blowing like this. He felt like cringing whenever it came howling at him. He had never considered himself a strong man, and now that he thought about it, his destiny since coming to Tokyo had been largely shaped by Yojiro, shaped in a way that you put him to some extent at the mercy of Yojiro's genial whims. Yojiro was a lovable mischief maker, he knew, and his destiny would remain in the hands of this lovable mischief maker for some time to come. The wind never let up. Surely the wind was something greater than Yojiro. Sanshiro placed the 30 yen from his mother by his pillow. This 30 yen had also been given birth to by a whim of fate. What task would it perform? He would bring it back to Mineko, and she took it. She was certain to fan the flames again. Let her come at me as boldly as she knows how, thought Sanshiro. With that With that, he fell asleep. It was a sleep too sound for either Destiny or Yojiro to touch. He woke to the ringing of a fire bell. There were voices. This was his second Tokyo fire. He put a coat over his sleeping robe and opened the window. The wind had died down considerably, but amidst its ongoing roar, the two-story house across the way looked pitch black. Black because the sky behind it was so red. Sanshiro stared at this redness for a while, enduring the cold. In his mind, destiny shone a brilliant red. He crawled back under the warm covers, and there he forgot about the lives of all the people raging about inside the red destiny. The next morning, he was an ordinary person again. He put on his uniform, picked up his notebook, and left for school. The one unusual thing this morning was the money, and this he did not forget to put inside his pocket. His schedule that day was not a good one. However, it was full until 3 o'clock. If he went after 3, Yoshiko would probably be home from school. The brother he knew only as Satomi Kyosuke might also be there. He felt quite incapable of returning the money if anyone else was going to be present. He ran into Yojiro, who picked up where he had left off. "Did you get your lecture last night?" "No, I wouldn't call it that." "I thought so. Nonomiya's no fool," he said and went off somewhere. Sanshiro saw Yojiro in other classes 2 hours later. "Things look very good for Professor Hirota," Yojiro said. Sanshiro asked how far the campaign had advanced. "Don't worry, I'll tell you all about it when we have time. The professor has been asking for you. You ought to go and see him more often. He's a bachelor after all. You have to cheer him up. Buy him something next time." Yojiro gave his orders and disappeared again. He materialized once more in the following class. This time, in the middle of the lecture, something possessed him to pass a white slip of paper to Sanshiro with a telegraphic note. "Received money?" Sanshiro considered writing an answer, but he looked up to find the professor staring straight at him. He crumpled the paper and threw it on the floor. Yojiro had to wait for his answer until the class is over. "Got it. It's right there." "Good. Are you gonna give it back?" "Of course I am. You ought to. The sooner the better. I'm going over with it today. She might be there if you go late in the afternoon." "Why? Has she been out?" "Has she? She goes out every single day to have a picture painted. It must be pretty much done by now." "At Haraguchi's?" "Right." Sanshiro asked Yojiro for Haraguchi's address. That's the end of chapter 9. One sip of tea will continue chapter 10. We are continuing chapter 10 of Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. Having heard from Yojiro that Hirota was not well, Sanshiro came to pay a sick call. He went through the gate and saw a pair of shoes in the hallway. Perhaps they were the doctor's. Walking around to the kitchen door as usual, he found no one. He wandered in as far as the sitting room. There were voices in the parlor. Sanshiro stood still, his large cloth bundle dangling from one hand. It was full of persimmons. He had brought them in oiwake, in compliance with Yojiro's orders. All of a sudden, there were some heavy thumps and grappling sounds in the parlor. It had to be a fight. Still holding on the cloth bundle, he shot the sliding door back a foot and glared inside. Professor Hirota was pinned under a large man in a brown divided skirt. Straining to lift his face from the mat, Professor Hirota looked at Sanshiro with a broad grin and said, "Hello there, come on in." The man on top glanced at Sanshiro and continued with the match. "Sorry, Professor, but try to get up," he said. He seemed to have the professor's arm twisted behind his back, with the elbows pinned to the floor beneath his knees. The professor replied from underneath that he would never be able to get up. With that, the man released his grip, lifted his knees, straightened the pleats of his skirt, and sat up on the matted floor. Now, Sanshiro could see what a powerfully built man he was. The professor also sat up. "I see what you mean," he said. "It's a dangerous technique. If you fight it, you could break your arm." Sanshiro now realized what they had been doing. heard that you were sick, Professor. Are you alright now? Yes, I'm fine. Sanshiro untied the cloth bundle and spread the contents of the packages between the professor and his guest. I brought you some persimmons. Professor Hirota went on to his study and came back with a penknife. Sanshiro brought some knives from the kitchen too. The three of them began to eat. Hirota and the unknown man talked incessantly about provincial middle schools, the difficulty of making a living, the student strikes, the man's inability to stay put for long, his extracurricular teaching of judo, and the economies of a colleague who retied old thongs to new wooden clocks, the difficulty of finding work now that he had resigned, and his decision to send his wife home to her parents until a new job turned up. Spitting out the persimmon stones, Sanshiro watched the man's face and started to feel miserable. It was almost as if this man and his present self were of wholly different races. I wish I could be a student again. The student life is the most carefree in this world. The man repeated this several times. When Sanshiro heard it, he wondered vaguely if 2 or 3 carefree years might be all that were left to him. This was not the light-hearted mood that accompanied eating noodles with Yojiro. Professor Hirota stood up and went to his study again. He came back holding a book with a dark red cover and dust-blackened edges. This is the book I told you about the other day, Hydrotaphia. Have a look at it if you're bored. Sanshiro thanked him and took the volume. A passage caught his eyes. Quote, "But the iniquity of oblivion blindly scattered her poppy and deals with the memory of man without distinction to merit of perpetuity." End quote. The professor was now free to continue his conversation with Dr. Judo. We heard about the way middle school teachers and such life, and it all seemed terribly sad, but the only ones who feel really sad are the men themselves. That's because modern day people are fond of facts, but they habitually throw out the sentiments that accompany the facts, which is all they can do. Because society is pressing in on us so relentlessly, we are forced to throw them out. You can see this in the newspaper. 9 out of 10 human interest stories are tragedies, but we have nothing to spare, nothing to enable us to feel them as tragedies. We read them only as factual reports. In the newspaper I often see the line "so and so many died," under which the name, address, and cause of death everyone who has died of unnatural causes that day is listed in small type, 1 line per person. It's the ultimate in concision and lucidity. There's also a column called Burglaries at a Glance, in which all the burglaries were lumped together so that you can literally, at a glance, what kind of burglaries have been committed where, another great convenience. You have to realize that everything is like this. It's the same with a resignation. To the man concerned, it might be an incident bordering on tragedy, but it's important to face the fact that others don't feel it with the same intensity. You would probably do well to keep this in mind when searching for work. Still, Professor, said the judo man, looking serious, if someone has as much to spare as you, I think it would be all right for him to feel things with a little intensity. At this, Professor Hirota, Sanshiro, and the man himself all laughed. It seemed as though the man was never going to leave. Sanshiro borrowed the book and went out by the kitchen door. To subsist in lasting monuments, to live in their productions, to exist in their names and predicaments of chimeras, was large satisfaction unto all expectations, and make one part of the Elysiums. But all this is nothing in the metaphysics of true belief. To live indeed is to again ourselves, which being not only a hope, but an evidence in noble believers, this all one to lie in the Saint Innocent's churchyard, as in the sands of Egypt, ready to be anything, the ecstasy of being ever, and as content with 6 foot as the moles of Adrianus. He reads the concluding paragraph of Hydriotaphia. as he ambled down the streets down Hakusan. According to Professor Hirota, this writer was a famous stylist, and this essay the best example of his style. That's not my opinion, of course, he had laughingly confided. And in fact, Sanshiro could not see what was so remarkable about this style. The phrasing was bad, the diction outlandish, and flow of words sluggish. It gave him the feeling of looking at some old temple. In terms of walking distance, it had taken him 3 or 4 blocks to read, and still he was not very clear about what it said. What he had gained from the paragraph wore a patina of age, as if someone had rung the bell of Great Buddha in Nara, and the lingering reverberation had faintly reached his ears in Tokyo. Rather than the meaning of the passage itself, Sanshiro took pleasure in the shadow of sentiment that crept over the meaning. He had never thought keenly about death. His youthful blood was still too warm for that. A fire leapt before his eyes, so gigantic that it could singe his brow, and this feeling was his true self. Now he was headed for Haraguchi's house in Akebonocho. A child's funeral procession came towards him. 2 men in formal coats were the only mourners. The little coffin was wrapped in spotless white cloth, a pretty pinwheel attached to its side. The wheel kept turning. Each of its 5 blades was painted a different color. They blurred into one as the wheel turned. The white coffin moved past him, the pinwheel spinning constantly. He thought it a lovely procession. Sanshiro had viewed another's writing and another funeral from a distance. If someone were to come along and suggest that while he was about it, he should look at Mineko from a distance, he would have been shocked, for his eyes were no longer capable of doing that. First of all, he was not conscious of a distinction between distant and the non-distant. He knew only that while he sensed a tranquil beauty in the death of another, there was a kind of anguish beneath the beautiful pleasure he felt from the leaving Mineko. He would move straight ahead, trying to sweep away his anguish. If he went forward, it seemed, the anguish would leave him. He never dreamed of stepping aside to shed it. Incapable of such thought, Sanshiro viewed the rites of extinction from far, as words on a page, and he felt the pathos of early death from a place apart. What should have brought him sadness, he viewed with pleasure and a sense of beauty. When he turned into Akebonocho, there was a large pine tree. Yojiro had told him to look for this house, and when he reached the tree, it was the wrong house. There was another pine tree farther on, and one beyond that. There were lots of pine trees. It was a nice neighborhood, thought Sanshiro. He passed several of the trees and turned left. There was a hedge and a handsome gate. The nameplate of this house did in fact say Haraguchi. It was a dark strip of wood with convoluted grain and a name lavishly inscribed in a green oil paint. The calligraphy was so ornate that the characters looked more like an abstract design. Nothing stood between the gate and the front door. It was clean and fresh. Grass grew on either side of the path. Mineko Wooden's clock were arranged neatly at the hallway. He recognized them from the right and the left thongs of each were different colors. The maid said that Haraguchi was at work on the painting, but Sanshiro could come in if he liked. He followed her into the studio. Thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you. It's a long read. Thank you. Okay. He followed her into the studio. It was a large room. Ooh. Oh, it's a busy day. So many people. Okay. It was a large room stretching a long way north and south. On this long floor lay an odd assortment of items befitting an artist's space. One area was covered with a rug.
out of proportion to the size of the room, it seemed less a rug than an elegantly figured colorful swatch that had been tossed there as a decoration. The same was true of the large tiger skin that lay farther on. It did not seem to have been placed there as a cushion for sitting. Its long tail stretched out at an angle incongruous to the rug. It was a large jar that looked as though it had been molded from sand. Two arrows protruded from its mouth between the rows of grey feathers. The shafts were covered with shiny gold leaf. Next to the jar was a suit of armor with overlapping plates of white and green and yellow-green. This, thought Sanshiro, was probably what the medieval war tales of Uno Hanao Doshi. In the far corner that was something brilliant and eye-catching. It was a violet robe of watered silk, with gold thread in the skirt's lavish embroidery. It had been hung as if for summer airing, with a cord passed through a short cylindrical sleeves. This must be what they call a genroku. In addition to these objects, the room had many paintings. The ones on the walls alone came to quite a number, of all sizes. Others, with no frames, possibly roughed-out canvases, lay in loose rows with the edges exposed. The portrait that was being painted at the moment stood amidst this spread of dazzling colors. The person who was painted stood against the far wall, holding up a round fan. Shoulders hunched, the man who was doing the painting began to rotate, palette in hand, until he was facing Sanshiro. His teeth clenched in a thick pipe. "Well, look who's here," he said, taking a pipe from his mouth and setting it down on a small round table where an ashtray and matches lay. Next to the table was a chair. "Have a seat. This is it," he said, looking toward the unfinished canvas. It was a full 6 feet high. Sanshiro said only, "It is big, isn't it?" "It's pretty big," said Haraguchi, more to himself than to Sanshiro. He started painting where the hair and background meet. Now at last, Sanshiro looked at Mineko. Her white teeth gleamed faintly in the shadow of the fan. For several minutes everything was silent. The warmth of a stove filled the room. Even outside, it was not especially cold today. The wind had died down. A withered tree stood there soundlessly, enveloped in the winter sun. When shown into the studio, Sanshiro had felt as if he were entering a mist. Elbow on a small round table, he gave himself over to this silence more total than night's. Within that silence there was Mineko, and there was the image of Mineko gradually taking shape. All that moved was the fat painter's brush. It moved only for the eye. To the ear, it was silent. The fat painter also moved at times, but his steps were soundless. Still in silence, Mineko remained utterly still. In her standing pose with the fan held aloft, she was already a picture. As Sanshiro saw it, Haraguchi was not painting Mineko. He was copying a painting of mysterious depth, using all his energy to make ordinary pictures that lacked precisely this depth. And yet, within the silence, the second Mineko was moving ever closer to the first. Sanshiro imagined that between these two Minekos lay a long silent time untouched by the sound of the clock. As the time passed by, so quietly as the artist himself was unaware of it, the second Mineko would at last catch up. And when the two were on the verge of meeting and melding into one, the river of time would suddenly shift its course and flow into eternity. Haraguchi's brush could go no farther. Sanshiro followed his musing to this point, then came back to himself and glanced at Mineko. She remained motionless as before. Sanshiro's mind had been on the move in this quiet air without his realizing it. He felt intoxicated. All of a sudden, Haraguchi laughed. "All right, I can see you are suffering again." Without a word, Mineko broke his pose and plopped into the easy chair nearby. Again, there was a white flash of teeth. As the sleeve of the upraised arm swept past her face, she looked at Sanshiro. Her glance pierced his brow like a meteor. Haraguchi walked over to the round table. "How do you like it?" he asked Sanshiro. He struck a match and lit his pipe again. Pressing the large wooden bowl between his fingers, he released 2 thick puffs of smoke through his mustache and turned until his round back faced Sanshiro again and approached the portrait. He started touching up various parts of the picture at will. The portrait was unfinished, of course, but the entire canvas had paint on it, and to Sanshiro's unpracticed eye, the picture looked quite good. Whether it was in fact a skillful job, he could not tell. Incapable of evaluating technique, Sanshiro had only the feeling that technique produced, and even that seemed to him way off the mark owing to his lack of experience. But he was not wholly oblivious to the effect of art, and at least to the extent he could be said to be a man of refined tastes. To Sanshiro, the painting looked like a single burst of light. The entire canvas seemed to have a powdery overlay of soft, glare-free sunlight. Not even the shadows were black. If anything, they had a touch of pale violet. The painting made Sanshiro feel light-hearted somehow. It had an exhilarating effect, like a ride in the swift riverboat, and yet there was something calm and settled about it too. It was not disturbing, certainly in no way bitter nor sharp or heavy. It was very much like Haraguchi himself, thought Sanshiro. Just then, Haraguchi spoke up, manipulating the brush almost casually. Here's an interesting story, Ogawa. A fellow I know got fed up with his wife and asked her for a divorce. She refused. Fate brought me to this house, she said. Even though you may be tired of me, I will never leave, she said. At that point, Haraguchi stepped back from the canvas to view the result of his brushworks. Then he spoke to Mineko. I do wish you had put on some summer clothes for me. I'm having a terrible time with the kimono. I'm doing it all by guesswork, and I think I've been a little too bold. It's all my fault, said Mineko. Haraguchi approached the canvas again without answering her. Well, anyhow, since his wife was too firmly planted to think of leaving, my friend said to her, Don't go if you don't want to. Stay as long as you like. I'll go. Mineko, could you stand up for a second, please? No, don't worry about the fan. Just stand up. That's it. Thanks. So, the wife said, How can I stay if you leave? Who will support me? My friend told her, Don't worry. You can always find a man who will marry into the family and take my name. What happened after that? Sanshiro asked. Haraguchi seemed to think the rest of the story was not worth telling. Nothing happened. It's just that you've got to think twice before you get married. It means the end of your freedom. The freedom to separate, freedom to get together with another person. Look at Professor Hirota. Look at Nonomiya. Look at Satomi Kyosuke. And look at me, all bachelors. When women come up in the world, lots of men stay single. As a basic rule of society, women ought to advance only to the degree that you don't produce bachelors. My brother is going to be married very soon, you know, Mineko broke in. He is? What's going to happen to you? I don't know. Sanshiro looked at Mineko. Mineko looked back at Sanshiro and smiled. Only Haraguchi was facing the portrait, and when he spoke, it was mostly to himself. I don't know, she says. I don't know. Oh well. He started painting again. Sanshiro took this opportunity to leave the table and approach Mineko. He had flung herself down and too exhausted to care about appearances. Her lusterless head of hair drooping against the chair black, her throat arched prominently from the collar of her underkimono. The pretty lining of her coat, which lay on the chair back, was visible above her swirling hairdo. Sanshiro had the 30 yen in his breast pocket. This money represented some inexplicable thing that existed between them, or at least he believed that it did. Because of this belief, he had thought about returning the money but had never done it. It was also because of this belief that he was now trying to return the money once and for all. When he had given it back, they would either drift apart for the lack of mutual concern, or they would grow closer in spite of it. Normal people might find Sanshiro a bit superstitious. Mineko? Yes? She looked up at him without moving her face. Only her eyes moved. They slowly to a stop when they were looking directly at him. He could see that she was tired. As long as I found you here, let me give this back, He loosened a button and thrust his hand into his jacket. What is it? Her tone, as before, betrayed no emotion. Hands still thrust inside his jacket. Sanshiro wondered what he should do. The money, he said at last. What can I do with it here? She was looking up at him. She did not reach out or change her position. Her face stayed motionless. He did not understand this woman. He did not understand her question. Just then, a voice behind him said, It won't be long now. How about it? He turned to find Haraguchi facing them, a brush between his fingers. He tugged at the neat triangle of his beard and smiled. Mineko grasped the arm of the chair and sat up very straight. Will this take long? Sanshiro asked softly. Another hour? She answered just as quietly. Sanshiro went back to the round table. Mineko resumed her post. Haraguchi lit his pipe again, and again his brush began to move. Turning his back to Sanshiro, he said, Ogawa, look at Mineko's eyes. Sanshiro did as he was told. Mineko lowered the fan and broke her pose. She turned to look at the window at the garden. No, you can't move now. I've just started. Why do you have to say that? She faced front again. Haraguchi explained, I'm not making fun of you. I have something to tell Ogawa. What is it? Just listen. Come. Stand the way you were. That's it. Elbow a little bit more this way. Now, as I was saying, Ogawa, do you think the eyes I have painted have the same expression as our actual models here? I don't know really. But when you paint someone like this over a long period of time, do the eyes keep the same expression day after day? No, they change, of course. And it's not just the model. The painter's mood changes every day too. There really ought to be several portraits when you're through, but we can't have that. The strange thing is that you end up with one fairly coherent painting. Think about it. Haraguchi was manipulating the brush all the while he thought. He kept looking at Mineko too. Sanshiro witnessed in awe his simultaneous functioning of Haraguchi's faculties. When I work on a painting day after day like this, each day a work accumulates, and soon the picture takes on a certain mood. So, even if I come back from some place in a different mood, once I walk into the studio face the picture, I can get right into it because the mood of the picture takes over. The same thing happens to Mineko. If you just leave her to be her natural self, different stimuli are bound to give her different expressions. But the reason this has no great effect on the painting is that her pose, say, and the flutter near the drum, the arm of the tiger skin, the habit of it becomes strong enough after a while to suppress any other expression, so that I can fairly well go on painting the look in the eyes as is. Now, I keep using the word expression, but Haraguchi suddenly broke off. He seemed to have come to something difficult. He took 2 steps back and started intently comparing Mineko and the picture. Mineko, is something wrong? No, nothing? It was inconceivable that this answer had come from her mouth. She kept her pose unbroken with such a perfect stillness. I keep using the word expression, Haraguchi went on, but an artist doesn't paint what's inside. He doesn't paint the heart. He paints what the heart puts on display. As long as he observes everything in the display case, he can tell what's locked up in the safe. Or we can assume that much, I suppose. A painter has to resign himself to the fact that anything he can't see on display is beyond the scope of his responsibility. That's why we paint only the flesh. Whatever flesh on an artist paints, if it hasn't got the spirit in it, it's dead. It simply has no validity as a painting. Now, take Mineko's eyes, for example. When I paint them, I'm not trying to make a picture of her heart. I'm just painting them as eyes. I'm painting these eyes because I like them. I'm painting everything I see about them, the shape, the shadows in the fold of the lids, the depth of the pupils, leaving nothing out. And as a result, almost by accident, a kind of expression takes shape. If it doesn't, it means I mixed the colors badly and I got the shape wrong, one or the other because the color and the shape are themselves of a kind of expression. Again, Haraguchi took 2 steps back, comparing Mineko with the picture. Something is wrong today, I'm sure. You must be tired. If you are, let's quit. Are you? No. Haraguchi walked up to the canvas again. Now, let me tell you why I picked Mineko's eyes. You find beauty in Western art, and no matter who paints her, she has big eyes. They all have these funny looking big eyes. In Japanese art though, women always have narrow eyes, from the images of Kanon down to comic masks and no mask, and especially the beauties in ukiyo-e prints. They all have elephant eyes. Why should standard of beauties be so different in the East and West? It seems strange at first, but actually it's very simple. Big eyes are the only thing they have in the West, so an aesthetic selection takes place among the big-eyed ones. All we have here in Japan are whale eyes. Pierre Loti made fun of them in Madame Chrysanthemum. How do they ever open those things, he said. You see, it's the nature of the country. There's no way for an aesthetic appreciation of big eyes to develop where materials are so scarce. Our ideal came from among the narrow eyes, where there was so much freedom of choice, and we see it prized in artists like Utamaro and Sukenobu. As nice and Japanese as they look to us, though, narrow eyes look terrible in Western painting. People think you have painted a blind woman, or, on the other hand, we don't have anybody who looks like Raphael's Madonna, and if we did, nobody would consider her Japanese. That, finally, is how I came to put Mineko through all this. Just a little longer, Mineko? She did not answer. She stood absolutely motionless.
Hey,
Good morning.
please take a seat. Thank you. Oh my god. Yeah, you can sit there. It's fine. We are currently reading Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki, Chapter 10. We have Chapter 10, 11, 12, and 13 to go. So today's going to be a bit of a long read, I think. So we are in the midst of Chapter 10. Sanshiro found the painter's remarks very interesting. If only he had come there specifically to hear them, he felt their interest would have been vastly increased. The focus of his attention, however, was neither Haraguchi's conversation nor Haraguchi's painting. It was concentrated, of course, on the standing figure of Mineko. He heard everything the painter had to say, and his eyes never left Mineko. To him, her pose looked like a natural process caught in the most beautiful moment and rendered immobile. There was a lasting solace in her unchangingness, but Haraguchi had suddenly turned his head and asked her if there was something wrong. Sanshiro felt almost terrified, as though the painter had informed him that the means of keeping this changeable beauty unchanged had spent itself. Now that Haraguchi mentioned it, Sanshiro noticed that there might indeed be something wrong with Mineko. Her color was bad, the glow was gone, the corners of her eyes revealed an unbearable languor. Sanshiro lost the sense of comfort this living portrait had given him. And at that moment, the thought struck him, perhaps he himself was the cause. An intense personal stimulus overtook Sanshiro's heart in that instant. The communal emotion of regret for passing beauty vanished from him without a trace. So great was his influence over her. With this new awareness, Sanshiro became conscious of his entire being. But was the influence to his advantage or disadvantage? This was a question as yet unanswered. Haraguchi laid his brush aside at last. Let's stop now, he said. We'll never get anything done today. Mineko dropped the fan to the floor as she stood. She picked up her coat from the chair and while putting it on, walked over to Haraguchi and Sanshiro. You're tired today, Haraguchi said. Am I? She straightened the coat and fastened the front tie. Actually, I'm tired too.
Hey, welcome back. Uh, okay, wait, where was it? Where did I stop? Actually, I'm tired too. Let's try again tomorrow when we have a little bit more energy. Have a cup of tea now. Don't run off. It was a while yet before evening, but she would be on her way. Mineko said there was something she had to do. Sanshiro also pointedly turned down Haraguchi's invitation to stay, and he left with Mineko. Given social custom, no amount of planning could have presented him with such a perfect opportunity, and he meant to exploit it. To stay with her as long as possible, he invited Mineko to take a stroll with him through this quiet neighborhood where there were relatively few passerbys. She was surprised and receptive to this idea, however, and headed straight down to the H-line road to the main thoroughfare. Walking beside her, Sanshiro said, Haraguchi was right, wasn't he? You're feeling out of sorts today. Am I? She said again, as she had replied to Haraguchi. Sanshiro had never known Mineko to be overly talkative. A phrase or two was all she ever needed, and yet, in Sanshiro's ears, these simple utterances produced a kind of profound resonance. There was a tone into her speech that was all but impossible to find in others. Sanshiro stood in awe of it. He marveled at it. When she said, Am I? Mineko had turned partway towards Sanshiro and looked at him from the corner of her eyes. A halo seemed to overlay the eye, which had a lukewarm feeling to it that he felt that he had never seen before. The cheek, too, was somewhat pale. You looked a little pale, I think. Do I? They took several steps without speaking. Sanshiro wanted desperately to tear away the thin curtain-like thing that hung between them, but he knew no words that would rend the fabric. He refused to speak the syrupy phrases they use in novels, the social usages of young men and women might permit it, but his personal sense of taste did not. He was hoping for the impossible, not only hoping, but struggling to devise a way to attain it as he walked along. My apologies for the crying baby in the background of my sound right now. My niece is here. I'm not enjoying it myself, but there's nothing I can do. I can only hope that my voice is loud enough to cover up the crying. Alright, let us continue. Chapter 10. Sanshiro, NatsumeSōseki. Finally, it was Mineko who spoke. Did you have some business with Mr. Haraguchi today? No, none. You just came for a visit then? No, that's not it either. Well then, why did you come? Sanshiro seized the moment. I came to see you. He felt that he had said everything he could possibly say. Mineko went on in a tone that betrayed no emotion, the tone that always had an intoxicating effect on Sanshiro. I could hardly take the money from you there. He was crushed. They took several more steps without speaking. Then Sanshiro said all at once, I didn't come to give you the money. Mineko did not reply immediately. When she spoke, her voice was soft. I don't need the money either. You keep it. Sanshiro could endure this no longer. I came because I wanted to see you, he said, searching for her eyes. She would not look at him. He heard a tiny sigh escape her lips. The money is... the damn money! Both left unfinished sentences hanging in the air. They walked on another half-block. This time she spoke. What did you think when you saw Haraguchi's portrait? There were so many ways he could answer this. Sanshiro walked a little without replying. Weren't you surprised at how quickly he was completing it? I was, he said, but the idea had not occurred to him. Now that he thought about it, it was only a month had gone by since Haraguchi visited Professor Hirota's and revealed his desire to paint Mineko, and his request at her at the museum had come even later than that. Unenlightened in the ways of art, Sanshiro found it all but impossible to imagine how much time it took to do a painting of that size. Now that Mineko had caught his attention to it, he felt that the painting was indeed being completed too quickly. When did he started working on it? He started painting in the earnest only a short while ago, but I had him doing a little bit at a time from before. When was before? You should be able to guess from my outfit. Sanshiro recalled at once that hot summer day long ago when he had first seen Mineko at the pond. Heavens! You must remember. You were squatting under the oak tree. You were standing on the hill holding up a fan. Yes, just like in the picture. They looked at each other. A little farther on, they would reach the top of Hakusan Hill. A rickshaw came dashing towards them from that direction. The passenger was wearing black hat and gold-rimmed glasses. The glow of his complexion was obvious even at a distance. From that moment, the rickshaw entered his field of vision. Sanshiro felt that the young gentleman passenger was staring at Mineko. The rickshaw stopped just ahead of them. Sanshiro watched the young man deftly thrust aside the blanket on his knees and spring down from the footboard. He was handsome, well-built man, tall and slim with a long face, and though clean-shaven, he was thoroughly masculine. You were so late, I came to get you. He stood directly in front of Mineko. He looked down at her, smiling. Oh, thank you. She was smiling too, as she returned his glance, but she immediately turned to Sanshiro. Who is this? The young man asked. Ogawa Sanshiro from the university, she said. The man tipped his hat to Sanshiro. Let's hurry. Your brother is waiting too. As it happened, they were standing at the corner where Sanshiro was to turn for Oiwake. He had still not returned the money when they parted. Aww. That's the end of chapter 10. Who's the mysterious guy? Wow. This novel is really keeping it going, man. Okay, we have like 3 chapters to go. Let's go. Let's continue quickly. It just keeps giving, man, this fucking novel. I mean, this really good fucking novel. Sorry, Sōseki. Guys. Ping pong. Let me see. Cute, handsome guy. Yeah. Shit. Sanshiro is not cute. Is he? Is Sanshiro cute? Can you imagine how Sanshiro looked like? I can't. Naive little young boy. Sorry. Okay, chapter 11. To those who had just joined in today, we are currently reading NatsumeSōseki Sanshiro, chapter 11. Yojiro was circulating through the school, selling tickets to the Literary Society's forthcoming drama nights. After 2 or 3 days, he seemed to have palmed tickets off on just about everyone he knew. That much accomplished, he concentrated on people he did not know. He generally caught them in the hallway, and once he had them, he would never let go. He nearly always got them to buy in the end. There were times, however, when the bell would ring in the middle of his pitch and the customer would escape. To explain these mishaps, Yojiro relied on Mencius. The opportunity of time had not been vouchsafed me, he would say. He had a similar pronouncement for these occasions when his adversary managed to put him off with smiles. The compliance of man has not been afforded me. Once he caught a professor who had just emerged from the men's room and was still wiping his hand. Not now! He protested and disappeared into the library. For this, Yojiro had no pronouncement. He simply watched the professor running off and informed Sanshiro, The man has interest. Sorry. The man has intestinal catarrh, I'm sure of it. How many tickets was Yojiro supposed to sell? As many as he should. As many as he could. Wasn't there any danger of selling more tickets than there were seats? Yes, there was a danger to that. Then wouldn't there be trouble after tickets were sold? No, not at all, Yojiro explained with a perfectly straight face. Many people bought tickets out of sheer obligation. Unforeseen events would keep others from attending, and there would be a little intestinal catarrh in the works too. Sanshiro watched how Yojiro sold his ticket. He took money on the spot from those who gave it to him and to the students who did not. He gave the tickets away anyway. He handed out enough tickets this way to worry his more timid companion, who asked if Yojiro would receive the money later. Of course not, Yojiro said. It was more profitable overall to sell a lot sloppily than a few carefully. He compared this to the London Times method of selling encyclopedias in Japan. The comparison sounded impressive enough, but it still left Sanshiro feeling uneasy. When he cautioned Yojiro, he received an interesting answer. I'll have you know that I am dealing with the students of Tokyo Imperial University. Maybe they are students, but most of them are just as easygoing about money as you are. Don't be stupid. The literary society is not going to have anything to say about people who don't pay in good faith. They're going to be in the red no matter how many tickets they sell. Is that your opinion of the societies? It is my opinion, of course, as well as the societies, came Yojiro's expedient reply. If one were to believe Yojiro, only an idiot would miss the performance. He held forth on the subject until his listeners began to feel like idiots themselves. But was he doing this to sell tickets or because he actually had faith in the show, or simply to lift his own spirit and those of his listeners and ultimately the spirits of the performance, thus making the air of the world in general as lively as possible? This was a distinction that eluded his customers, and so, despite his success in making them feel like idiots, Yojiro was unable to influence them very much. He spoke first on the tremendous effort of the actors in rehearsal. If what he said was true, most of them would be worn out before the day of the show. Then he talked about the scenery, which he said was extraordinary. He made it sound as though the society had recruited all the talented young artists in Tokyo and had encouraged each of them to devote his special skills to it. Next, he talked about the costumes. They were historically authentic in every detail. Then he talked about the plays. They were all new works and delightful. He had any number of topics in addition. Yojiro said he had sent complimentary tickets to the Professor Hirota and Haraguchi, and he had gotten the Nonomiyas and Satomis to buy the most expensive seats. Everything was going well. Sanshiro offered Yojiro his best wishes for the show's success. Yojiro showed up at Sanshiro's room that night, a changed man. He sat stiffly at the charcoal brazier, complaining of the cold more than the cold was bothering him, however, judging from the look on his face. At first, he hunched over the brazier, warming his hands, but eventually he put his hands inside his kimono. Sanshiro moved the oil lamp from one end of his desk to the other, hoping to lend some brightness to Yojiro's countenance, but with his chin buried in his chest, his black blur of Yojiro's close-cropped head was the only part of him to catch the light. The lamp made no difference. What was wrong? Sanshiro asked. Yojiro raised his head and looked at the lamp. Don't they have electricity in this house yet? His question had nothing to do with the look on his face. Not yet. They're planning to get it soon, though. Oil lamps are too dim for much of anything. But Yojiro seemed to have forgotten about the lamps even while Sanshiro was answering him. Something terrible has happened, Ogawa. What is it? Yojiro produced some wrinkled newspaper from the breast of his kimono. There were 2 papers folded together. He peeled one off, refolded it, and thrust it towards Sanshiro. Read this. His fingertip lay where Sanshiro was to read. Sanshiro moved closer to the lamp. The headline said, University Literature Department. Heretofore, said the article, administrators of the university's program in foreign literature has assigned all courses to foreign instructors. For now, at long last, in response to the march of time and the demands of many students, the lectures of Japanese were to be recognized among the compulsory courses. A research for an appropriate individual had been underway for some time, and the announcement of a decision in favor of one Mr. So-and-so was to be made shortly. This particular man was an outstanding scholar who, until recently, had been studying abroad under orders from the government, and his appointment was no doubt most fitting. So, Professor Hirota didn't make it. Sanshiro turned to Yojiro, who was still looking at the newspaper. Is this definite? I'm afraid so. Yojiro cocked his head to one side. I thought it was just about a sure thing, but we bungled it. Of course, I heard the other fellow was pushing hard for it too. But this is still a rumor after all. You can't be sure until they finally make it public. If that were the only thing, it wouldn't matter, of course. It has nothing to do with the professor, but... He refolded the other paper and pointed to the headline as he placed in front of Sanshiro. This article started out saying much the same thing as the first one and could hardly to be expected to make a new impression on Sanshiro. When he came to the next part, however, Sanshiro was astonished. Professor Hirota, it said, was an unscrupulous schemer. He had been a language teacher for 10 years, utterly unknown, a mediocrity, but no sooner that he heard the university was due to appoint a Japanese professor of foreign literature than he began a furtive campaign on his own behalf and disseminate propaganda leaflets among students. Moreover, he had urged a protege of his to write an essay called The Great Darkness for one of his little magazines. It had appeared under a pseudonym A. Propagule, but in fact the author was known to be a habitué of Hirota's house, a student of the Faculty of Letters by the name of Ogawa Sanshiro, and the article concluded. Yabai ne. I didn't see that coming, sorry. Sorry, I didn't see that. Oh my god. I didn't see that coming. Sanshiro looked as questioningly at Yojiro. Yojiro was already looking at Sanshiro. For a while, they said nothing. Finally, Sanshiro spoke. This is bad. Literally yabai. Literally yabai ne. This is bad. The note of resentment in his voice was meant for Yojiro, but Yojiro had other things in his mind. What do you think of it? He asked. What do you mean? What do I think of it? I'm sure the newspaper would just publish a letter to the editor as is. No reporter dug it out. Stuff like this comes to the literary reviews readers' column all the time. That's what a reader's column is, after all. A pile of crimes. Look into most of the stories, and they're a pack of lies. Some are lies on the face of it. And why do you think some people print such stupidity, eh? The motive is always some personal advantage. So whenever I was in charge of the reader's column, I threw most of the ugly ones into the wastebasket. That's just what this article is. It comes from the other guy's campaign. Why does it have my name and not yours? That's what I was wondering, said Yojiro, and then he attempted an explanation. Maybe it's because you're a regular student and I'm just a special student? To Sanshiro, this was no explanation at all. It did nothing to soften the blow. Instead of that propagule nonsense, I should have signed it Sasaki Yojiro for all to see. There's not another man alive who could have written that essay. Yojiro was serious, as though Sanshiro had usurped his copyright. Sanshiro was finding this ridiculous. Have you told the professor? He asked. Ah, that's the trouble. It doesn't matter who the real author of the Great Darkness is, but as long as it reflects on the professor's character, I have to tell him, you know, what he's like. Before I could have said I didn't know a thing. That was probably a mistake. That an essay had appeared in a magazine under a pseudonym, that he need not worry about it because it was written by an admirer of his. He would have said, "Oh," and that would have been the end of it, but not the way things are right now. I'll have to confess my responsibility. If things had worked out, I would have felt good doing my part anonymously, but now that I have failed, I'd never feel right keeping it quiet. I'm the one who started it all. I'm the one who got that good, innocent man into this mess. And now I'm damned if I'll just stand idly by and watch what happens. Strict questions of right and wrong aside, I feel sorry for him. It hurts me to see this happen to him. For the first time, Sanshiro felt Yojiro to be an admirable man. Do you think he saw the newspaper? It wasn't in the paper we take. That's why I didn't know about it. But the professor reads other papers at school, and even if he didn't see it, somebody would be sure to tell him. So, he probably knows by now. Of course he knows. He hasn't said anything to you? Not a word. But then, I haven't had the time for a decent talk with him lately. I've been running all over the place with the drama thing, and I'm fed up with that too. I ought to quit. Who cares if a bunch of idiots smear themselves with makeup and put on a show? The professor's going to blow up when you tell him. I suppose he will. I can't help that. But I'm so sorry I had to stick to my nose in and give him this to worry about. A man like that without vices, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke. Yojiro cut himself short. A month's worth of the professor's philosophical smoke would make a prodigious cloud. Well, he does smoke a lot, but that's all he does. That's all he does. He doesn't fish or play golf. He has no family life to enjoy. That's the worst thing. He ought to have a wife and kids, and he's such an ascetic. Yojiro folded his arms. For once, I put a little effort into trying to cheer him up, and look what happens. You ought to do him a favor and dropped over. Do him a favor? I share some of the responsibility too, you know. I'll go and apologize. You've got nothing to apologize for. Alright, I'll go and explain things. Yojiro left. After that, Sanshiro crawled into bed and lay there tossing and turning. It was easier to fall asleep at home in Fukuoka. Here, there were so many stimuli. False news report, Professor Hirota, Mineko, the handsome young man who came and took her away. It was after midnight when he finally fell asleep. Waking up at the usual time next morning was truly painful. He met another faculty of letters students in the lavatory, someone he knew only by sight. From the fellow's perfunctory "Good morning," Sanshiro sensed he had read the article. He did avoid the subject, however, and Sanshiro volunteered no excuses. As the warm fragrance of morning broth reached him, Sanshiro found a letter from his mother. It looked like another long time. After he had pulled on his divided skirt, it was too much to bother to change into Western clothes. He thrust the letter into the breast of his kimono and went out. Everything gleamed with a light of frost. He came to the main thoroughfare. Practically all those he saw walking there were students, all heading in the same direction, all in a hurry. The cold street was full of the same vitality of a young man. In the midst of this he saw the long shadows of Professor Hirota in a grey tweed overcoat. His stride made the professor an anachronism in these youthful ranks. It was so much slacker than that of others around him. The professor's shadow disappeared into the college gate. Inside was a large pine tree, its branches spread out like giant umbrellas blocking the front door. When Sanshiro passed the gate, the professor's shadow had vanished. The only things out front were the pine tree and the clock tower above it. This clock always had the wrong time, if it was running at all. As he glanced through the gate, Sanshiro twice muttered the word hydriotaphia. Of all the foreign words he had learned thus far, hydriotaphia was one of the longest and one of the hardest. He still did not know what it meant. He was planning to ask Professor Hirota. Yojiro guessed that it was just something like Dete Fabula, but Sanshiro saw an enormous difference between the two. Dete Fabula was a phrase that called for dancing. Just learn hydriotaphia was a time-consuming effort, and saying it twice caused one's pace to slacken. It sounded like a word the ancients had devised for Professor Hirota's personal use. At school, Sanshiro felt as though everyone's attention was fixed on him as the author of the Great Darkness. He tried waiting outside for the class to start, but it was too cold. He stayed in the corridor. Between classes, he read his mother's letter. "Come home this winter vacation," it said, much like the others she used to send him when he was at school in Kumamoto. Once a telegram had arrived at the start of a vacation, telling him to come home right away. Shocked to think that his mother might be ill, he had rushed back to Fukuoka. She was overjoyed to see him in one piece. What was this all about? He wanted to know. She said she seemed to be taking forever to come home, so she had asked an oracle of the Inari shrine. It told her he had already left Kumamoto, which made her fear that something had happened to him on the way. Recalling the incident, Sanshiro wondered if he had been the victim of another oracle, but the letter said nothing about the Inari. It did have a note squeezed between the lines saying that Miwata Omitsu was looking forward to seeing him too. Omitsu had left girls' schools in Toyotsu and was living at home again. His mother had asked Omitsu to sew him a quilted robe, which should be arriving soon in the mill. Kakuzo, the carpenter, had lost 98 yen gambling in the hills. Her report of this incident was very detailed, and he skimmed it. Apparently 3 men had come to see Kakuzo about buying a hill that he owned. He lost the money while showing them around the property. At home, he told his wife he had no idea when the money was taken. She guessed that he had been chloroformed, and Kakuzo said that he did remember some kind of smell, but everyone in the village thought that he had been cheated at gambling. His mother concluded with the moral of the story: if something like this could happen in the country, then he better watch his step in Tokyo. As he was rolling up his mother's long letter, Yojiro walked over to him and said, "Aha! A woman's hand." His spirits had improved since last night. If he was making jokes, "Don't be stupid. It's my mother's." Sanshiro answered with a touch of annoyance. He returned the letter to its envelope to the breast of his kimono. "Are you sure it's not from a certain Miss Satomi?" No, it's not.
"Say, have you heard of Miss Satomi?" "Heard what?" Just then, a student came to tell Yojiro that someone was waiting for him on the floor below to buy a ticket to the play. Yojiro hurried downstairs. With that, Yojiro disappeared. Sanshiro badly wanted to catch hold of him, but Yojiro was not coming back. There was nothing for Sanshiro to do but throw himself into taking notes. When the lectures ended, he went to the Professor Hirota's as he had promised to do the night before. The house was as quiet as ever. The professor was stretched out in the sitting room, asleep. Was he not feeling well? Sanshiro asked the old servant. No, that was not it, she replied. He had told her that he was sleepy from staying up late that night before, and he had lain down as soon as she had come home from school. A small quilt lay on top of his long frame. Again, Sanshiro questioned the maid in soft tones. What had kept him up so late? The professor always stayed up late, she said, but last night, instead of studying, he had a long talk with Yojiro. Now that Yojiro had taken the place of studying, Sanshiro no longer had an explanation for the professor's snap, but at least
He could be sure that Yojiro had his talk with the professor. He wanted to ask what sort of scolding Yojiro received, but the maid could not be expected to know that. He had not lost chance of finding out when he let Yojiro sleep from his scraps at school. Yojiro had probably gotten off lightly, though, judging from his good spirit. But then, workings of Yojiro's mind were forever beyond Sanshiro's, and he could not imagine what had actually happened. Sanshiro sat down in front of the charcoal brazier, and the iron kettle was ringing. The maid withdrew to her room. Sanshiro sat cross-legged, warming his hands over the kettle and waiting for the professor to wake up. He was sound asleep. Sanshiro enjoyed the tranquil mood. He tapped the kettle with his fingernails. He poured himself a cup of hot water, blew it across a few times, and drank it down. The professor laying the other way, his hair was exceedingly short. He had probably had it cut just a few days ago. The tip of his heavy moustache was visible. Sanshiro could not see his nose from here, but the steady sound of his breathing was clearly audible. He was sleeping peacefully. Sanshiro opened Hydriotaphia, which he had brought to give back to the professor. He sampled a few passages at random, but understood very little. There was something about throwing flowers into the grave. It said that the Romans affected the rose. He did not know what that meant, but he supposed you could translate it into something like to be fond of them. The Greeks also used amaranthus, it said. This was not clear either, but it must have been the name of a flower. A little farther on, the text became completely unintelligible. He took his eyes from the page and looked at the professor, who was still asleep. Why had the professor lent him such a difficult book? And why, though he could not understand it, did this book arouse his curiosity so? He decided in the end that the Professor Hirota was himself Hydriotaphia. Hydriotaphia. At the point Professor Hirota woke up, he raised his head and looked at Sanshiro. "When did you get here?" he asked. Sanshiro urged him to go back to sleep. In fact, he was not at all bored. "No, I'm getting up," he said, and did so. He started blowing more philosophical smoke. It emerged in shafts in silence. "Thanks for the book. I'm returning it." "Oh, did you read it?" "Yes, but I didn't understand it. To begin with, I don't understand the title." "Hydriotaphia? What does it mean?" "I don't know myself. I suppose it's Greek." Sanshiro lost the courage to ask any more. The professor yawned. I was tired. That was a nice nap. I had an interesting dream." "It was about the girl," he said. Sanshiro expected him to go on with the dream, but instead the professor invited him to the public bath. They went out carrying towels. After bathing, they mounted a scale in the dressing room and measured their heights. Professor Hirota was 5 feet 7 inches. Sanshiro only 5 feet 5. "Maybe you'll grow some more." "No, that's it for me. I have been the same for 3 years." "I wonder." The professor still thought of him as very much a child, it seemed. When they got back to the house, the professor invited him to stay and chat if he had nothing to do. He opened the door to his study and stepped in. Sanshiro followed. In any case, it was his study, his duty to take care of one outstanding piece of business. "I guess Yojiro hasn't come home yet," Sanshiro began. "I think he said he'll be late today. He has been running around a lot on the drama business. It's impossible to tell whether he's enjoying helping out or he just likes running around. He's a kind person, that's for sure. I suppose that's some kindness in what he aims to do, but his brain is not made for kindness, so he doesn't do much good with it. At first glance, he seems to know what he's doing, but knows all too well what he's doing, but in the end, he loses track of what he's doing it for, so it all falls apart. I just leave him alone though, because he won't change no matter what I say. He was born into the world to do mischief." Sanshiro felt there must be some way to defend Yojiro, but he was faced now. with an unfortunate case in point. He changed the subject. Did you see the article in the paper? Yes, I did. Was that the first you had heard of all that? It was. It must have been a shock. A shock? Well, I suppose to some extent it was a shock, but I know what life is like, so I don't shock as easily as a younger man. It must have been upsetting then. I suppose to some extent it was upsetting, but not everyone who has lived in this world as long as I have would accept that article as truth. So again, I'm not upset as easily as a younger man. Yojiro was spouting a lot of nonsense about setting things straight. He would ask a friend of his on the newspaper to have the true story printed. He would find out who sent it in and get even with him. He would feature a rebuttal of his own magazine. But you have to go to all the trouble. It would be better not to stick your nose in to begin with. He did it all for you, Professor. He didn't mean any harm. No, of course he didn't mean any harm, but don't you see? If a man starts a campaign on my behalf without consulting me, he's just toying with my existence. Think how much better off if you'd have to be you have to have your existence ignored. At least your reputation wouldn't suffer. Sanshiro had no way to respond to this. And that asinine thing he wrote, the great darkness, the paper said that you wrote it, but Sasaki told me that it was really him. That's right. Sasaki confessed last night. You're the one who ought to be upset. Sasaki is the only man alive who could write such idiocy. I read it. It's like some big Salvation Army drum without substance or dignity. You would think it was written to put people off. It's calculated from beginning to end. Anyone with little common sense can see the author had an ulterior motive. No wonder they thought I had a protege of mine write the damn thing. When I read it, I could see the newspaper article wasn't so far-fetched after all. With that, Professor Hirata stopped talking and began to blow the usual smoke from his nose. According to Yojiro, you could tell the professor's mood by the way the smoke emerged. When the stream comes out thick and straight, his philosophy had attained its ultimate height, and when it crumbled out slowly, he was serene in spirit, which meant there was some danger to his unleashing his wit on you. When the smoke lingered beneath his nose and seemed to loaf to part from his mustache, he was in a meditative frame of mind, or else he was feeling poetic inspiration. Most terrifying of all were the whirlpools at the nostril, which meant he was going to drag you over the coals. Since the source of this information was Yojiro, Sanshiro did not take it seriously. But given the nature of the occasion, he carefully noted the forms in which the smoke emerged. He discovered none of the clear-cut types that Yojiro had mentioned. Instead, all the characteristics seemed to be there at once. Several moments went by during Sanshiro's refrain from speaking as though intimidated. The professor began again. Anyhow, it's over, so let's forget about it. Sasaki apologized for everything last night. And I suppose he's his old self again today, flying around. It won't do any good to criticize him from behind his back. He's out selling tickets as if nothing happened. Let's talk about something more interesting. 1 second. Tea? Yes, let's. I had an interesting dream last night. Wow, sorry. I had an interesting dream while I was napping. I suddenly met a girl I had seen only once in my life. This may sound like something from a novel, but it will be more fun than talking about the newspaper articles. Yes, what kind of girl? A pretty little thing, maybe 12 or 13. She had a mole on her face. Sanshiro was a bit disappointed when he heard her age. When did you see her? 20 years ago. This too came as a surprise. It's amazing you knew who she was. This was a dream. You notice things in dreams? And because it was a dream, it didn't matter that it was mysterious. I was walking through a big forest, I guess, wearing that faded summer suit of mine and that old hat.
Ah, I remember. Some complicated thoughts were going through my mind. The laws of the universe are all unchanging, but all things in the universe governed by the laws inevitably change. Thus, the law must exist independently of the things. Now that I am awake, it sounds pretty silly, but in my dream I was walking along in the forest, thinking seriously about this kind of thing, when I suddenly met her. We didn't walk up to each other. She was suddenly she was standing there, up ahead, very still. She had the same face as before, the same clothing, the same hairdo, and of course the mold. She was still 12 or 13 exactly, as I had seen her 20 years ago. You haven't changed at all, I said to her, and she said, You're so much older than you were. Then I asked her, Why haven't you changed? And she said, Because the year I had this face, the month I wore these clothes, the day I had my hair like this, is my favorite time of all. What time is that? I asked her. The day we met 20 years ago, she said. I wondered to myself, then why have I aged like this? And she told me, because you wanted to go on changing, moving towards something more and more beautiful. Then I said to her, You are a painting. And she said, You are a poem. Oh my god. Sorry, I had to highlight this quote. It's so cheesy, but I love it. Wow! So romantic. Sorry for stopping. Then I said to her, You're a painting. And she said, You're a poem. Sanshiro asked, What happened after that? After that you came. It wasn't a dream that you saw her 20 years ago, was it? That actually happened. Yes, that's what's interesting. Where did you see her? The professor nostril started smoking again. He stared at the smoke and said nothing for a while, then he continued. The promulgation of the Constitution took place in 1889, the 22nd year of Meiji. The Minister of Education, Mori Arinori, was assassinated before he was to leave for the ceremonies. You wouldn't remember. Let's see, how old are you? Yes, you are still an infant. I was in college. A number of us ordered to participate in the funeral procession. We left with the rifles on our shoulders, thinking we would be marching to the cemetery. But that wasn't it. The gym instructor took us over to the Takebashiuchi and lined us up in a long street. We were supposed to accompany the minister's coffin to the cemetery by standing there. It amounted to nothing more than watching the funeral go by. I can still remember how cold it was. The soles of our feet hurt from standing still. The fellow next to me kept looking at my nose and saying how red it was. Finally, the procession came, and I guess it was a long one. An endless number of rickshaws and carriages went past us in the cold. In one of them was the little girl. I'm trying to bring back the scene, but it was too hazy. I can't form a clear picture of it. I do remember the girl though, even though she has become less distinct as the years have passed, and now I rarely think of her. Until I saw her in my dreams today, I had forgotten all about her. Back then, the image was so clear. It was practically burned into my brain. Strange. And you never saw her again? No, never. Then you don't know anything about her? No, of course not. Didn't you try to find out who she was? No. And is that why you... Sanshiro could not go on. Why I what? Why you never married? The professor burst out laughing. I'm hardly such a romantic. I'm far more prosaic character than you. But you would have married her if you could have, isn't it true? Well, he said, and after thinking about it, yes, I suppose I would have married her. A look of pity crossed Sanshiro's face. When he saw this, the professor went on. If you are going to say that I was forced to remain single because of that, it meant the girl turned me into a cripple. But some people are born
to matrimonial cripples. They are simply incapable of marrying. Others can't marry for one reason or another. Are there so many things that prevent people from marrying? The professor looked at Sanshiro steadily through the smoke. You know that Hamlet didn't want to marry. Maybe there was only one Hamlet and there were lots of people like him. For example? For example, the professor began and stopped. The smoke was pouring out of him. For example, let's suppose there's a young man. His father died early and he has been raised by his mother. Then his mother falls ill, and when she's about to die, she tells him to go to a certain man, that this man will take care of him. The son has never met the man, has never even heard of him. He asks his mother, what is this all about? She doesn't say anything. He presses for an answer, and in feeble voice, she tells him that the man is his real father. This is just a story. But suppose there were a son with a mother like that, don't you think he would lose all faith in marriage? There couldn't be many people like that.
No, not many, but there are some. You're not one of them, aren't you, Professor? The professor laughed. Then he asked, your mother's still living, isn't she? Yes. And your father? He's dead. My own mother died the year after the promulgation of the Constitution.
That was the end of chapter
11. Ah, isn't that a good quote? You're a painting and you're a poem.
I'm so cheesy and cringy that I like it.
Even though I'm crass, I am very romantic at heart, I guess. Sorry, my God, I'm yawning. I woke up early, okay?
Sorry. Okay. We have chapter 12 and chapter 13 to go.
Yeah, I think the professor regret that he didn't say that. Probably. 20 years. Took him 20 years to say that. Okay, let's take a short break. I'll tell you that one time when a Japanese guy said something about NatsumeSōseki, okay, that I know this guy, this guy that I work with him. He's a real Japanese man. So he asked me what hobby I like. I said I like to read, and then he asked me who's my favorite author, and being a weeaboo as I am, I was like NatsumeSōseki, and then he was like, furui ne, it's like so old, that's so old. And then I was like, yeah, but everything that NatsumeSōseki writes in the early 1900s is still relevant to this day, and a lot of his stuff I like, a lot of his premonition and his guesses and his things that he wrote all came true in the modern Japan or even modern world to this day, and still relevant to this day. That's why he's one of my favorite authors. And then he said that when he was a teenager and he was studying at school, I mean this guy that I was talking to, he said that when he was studying at school, learning about NatsumeSōseki's novels and everything, he learned that NatsumeSōseki went to England to study literature, which is true. He did. Sōseki went to England to study English literature, but he had a very, very bad time there. He doesn't like it there, and he was very, very poor. So he really didn't have a good time there, and came back a nihilist, basically. Like he just really doesn't like it there in England. Anyway, so there was one time the English people asked him, how do you say I love you in Japanese, right? So this is a story that this Japanese guy is telling me. So the English people asked him, so asked Sōseki, how do you say I love you in Japanese? instead of saying aishiteru or daisuki, Sōseki said, the moon is beautiful tonight. Tsuki ga kirei, he said. And then I was like, huh, why didn't he translate I love you too into Japanese properly? Instead he said, Tsuki ga kirei, like the moon is beautiful. And then the Japanese guy I was talking to was like saying, because Japanese men find it very hard to express their love or express their feelings to another person. So it's like the same thing with Sōseki. He himself has a hard time expressing his love. So instead of like translating it in directly, he just says the moon is beautiful. It's like like super, and then I just, oh, I see. Okay, question is, guys and girls, is the Japanese guy talking to me and telling me these stories, flirting with me, or not? Please let me know. cause it, I didn't quite respond. I just laughed at the time. So, Twisty. Yeah, I told you this, right? So that was the question I'm asking. So, yeah, Twisty. So yeah, that's the memory that I had. That's like from like fucking 6-7 years ago. Holy shit, I'm fucking old as fuck, bro. Yeah, you think so? Huh. I see. Okay, let's continue. Let's not talk about my weird encounter with a Japanese man talking to me about NatsumeSōseki. Let's continue reading this. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh, you gotta go. I'm so sorry. I took so long. My apologies, Zell. Go and have fun. Don't sit here. It's very boring. I know. Okay, I told you, right? Okay. Why are you still awake? Go to sleep. What the fuck are you doing to sleep? Anyway. No, it's okay. Go. No worries. Yes. Yes, he does like haircuts and big mouths. No, don't worry, Zell. Okay, do you want to go to Starlight? I got 2 more chapters to go. Yes. And pizza. He likes pizzas too. He's a weird one. Okay, let us continue, okay? For those who just joined in, NatsumeSōseki, we are currently reading NatsumeSōseki, Sanshiro, chapter 12. We have 2 chapters to go, chapter 12 and chapter 13. So, and then we are done with Sanshiro. I think it's gonna be a short one. Chapter 12 and 13 is quite short. Okay, never mind. Okay. You know, I actually forgot that he liked Big Macs. You reminded me that. I really forgot. Chapter 12. The weather was relatively cold when the literary society presented its 4 nights of drama. Ooh. The old year was drawing to a close and the new lay just in sight. Oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for laughing much. I saw the word big one and then I just heard his voice. Oh my god, that brings back memories. Big one. I'm sorry. Oh, stupid. Let me read. I don't remember that. Why do you have to remind me that? I used to do such great impression of him, right? I don't think I could do that anymore. I haven't spoken to him in years. Oh yeah, I spoke to him like last year or something. Yeah. Yeah, that's yeah. Sorry, just like inside jokes between me and Christy. God. I'll tell you all later. I'll tell you later. Don't worry, Starlight. I'll tell you later. Okay. 12. Chapter 12. Let's continue reading chapter 12. I'm sorry to those YouTube listeners that I like stopped for so long. Someone better make a timestamp for chapter 12. Yeah, wait. Hang on. Should I put up my party finder still? Yeah. Let's do it. Okay. Chapter 12. Sanshiro. The weather was relatively cold when the Literary Society presented its 4 nights of drama. The old year was drawing to a close and the new lay just in sight, not quite 3 weeks away. The men of the marketplace felt the holiday rush. The year-end balancing of the books fell on the heads of the poor. In the midst of this, the drama nights welcomed the more comfortably off the men of leisure, those who saw no difference between the old year and the new, and of these there were many, men and women, mostly young. On the first day, Yojiro proclaimed their great success to Sanshiro and told him to bring Professor Hirota along for the second day's show. The tickets were for different performances. Sanshiro objected. Yes, of course, Yojiro answered, but the professor would never go on his own. Sanshiro must stop by and lure him out. He agreed to do so. He went in the evening and found the professor seated at his low desk on the matted floor, a large book spread open in the glow lamp. When Sanshiro invited him out, the professor smiled faintly and shook his head. It was the sort of thing a little boy might do, but to Sanshiro it seemed typical of a scholar. Perhaps he found a certain dignity in the silent gesture. Sanshiro bent over, looking blankly at the professor. Hirota felt sorry he had turned him down. If you are going, I'll walk with you as far as the theater. They went out. The professor wearing a black cape. He seemed to have his arms folded under the cape, but Sanshiro could not be sure. The sky hung low. It was the kind of cold nights when the stars was not visible. Looks like rain, the professor said. I hope not, for their sake. Yes, it would be awkward for going in and out of the theater, but Japanese theater are a bother even when the weather is good. You have to check your shoes at the door, plus there's no ventilation. The place fills up with tobacco smoke. You get a headache. It's a wonder people stick it out. Maybe so, but they certainly couldn't have it outdoors. Local Shinto dancing is always done outdoors, even in cold weather. That was beside the point, thought Sanshiro, foregoing a reply. To me, outdoors is the best. I would like to see a beautiful play, breathing beautiful air beneath a lovely sky when it's neither too hot nor too cold. Then you could have a play as pure and simple as the transparent air. Your dream will be like that, Professor, if it were made into a play. Do you know much about Greek theater? Not much. They perform outdoor, didn't they? Yep, that they did, in broad daylight. It must have been a great joy. The seats were natural stones, a theater in the grand manner. I would like to take the old Yojiro there and let him have a look. It would do him good. He was starting in on Yojiro again. Funny, because right about now Yojiro was in his element, racing around inside the cramped theater, ostentatiously lending his assistance to all he deemed in need. And even funnier would be Yojiro's plaint if Sanshiro showed up without the professor. He really didn't come. I wish he would come and see something like this once in a while. It would do him good. But he never listens to me, damn it.
The professor went on to describe the construction of a Greek theater in detail. Sanshiro learned the meaning of theatron, orchestra, scheme, proskinion. He learned that, according to some German or other, the theater in Athens could seat 17,000 people, and that was on the small side. The large one seats 50,000. He learned that there were two kinds of tickets used, ivory and lead. Both were fashioned into something like a medallions with embossed or carved designs. The professor even knew the price of admission. One day's performance cost 12 cents, a full 3-day program 35 cents. Sanshiro was still expressing his admiration for the professor's knowledge when they came to the door of the theater. The place glowed with electric lights. People were streaming into the entrance. The activity here surpassed even Yojiro's description. Why not come in, Professor, now that you have walked this far? No, not me. He went off into the darkness again. Sanshiro stood watching the professor receding shadow, and then he saw more rickshaws arriving and their passengers rushing inside, as if they resented the time it took to check their shoes. Sanshiro too was in effect pushed into the theater. At the entrance stood 4 or 5 men with nothing to do. One in formal dress took his ticket. Sanshiro glanced across the man's shoulder into the hall. In an instant, the space became very broad and very bright. He almost wanted to shade his eyes as he was led to his seat. Fitting himself into the narrow allotted space, he scanned his surroundings. His eyes danced after the colors that these assembled human beings that had brought with them. This was not simply because he kept his eyes moving, but the colors attached to the numberless human beings all moved ceaselessly, each independent of the others, within the great enclosure. On stage, the action had already begun. All the characters wore the shoes and headgear of ancient Japanese nobility. A long palanquin was carried on. Someone in the middle of the stage forced it to a halt. When the man lowered the palanquin, yet another character emerged from it. He drew his sword and began dueling with the ones who had stopped the palanquin. Sanshiro had no idea what's going on. Yojiro had told him the story, but he had not paid much attention, assuming that it would be clear enough when he saw the play. Now, however, the meaning eluded him. He remembered only the name of great minister Iruka. Which of them could be Iruka, he wondered. Soon, he despaired of ever finding out and decided to watch the entire stage as a manifestation of Iruka. After a while, the headgear, the boots, and the narrow sleeve robes, even the language began to seem Iruka-esque. In fact, Sanshiro had no very precise idea who Iruka was to begin with. His study of Japanese history was itself a thing of the distant past, and Iruka, who figured in the most ancient part, he had forgotten entirely. Perhaps he had lived in the reign of Empress Suiko? True, it might just as well been Emperor Kinmei. It was neither Ojin nor Shomu. Of that he felt certain. Sanshiro was simply in Iruka mood. That was quite enough for watching the play, he decided, looking at the vaguely Chinese-style costume and scenery. The plot, however, he did not understand in the least. Eventually, the curtain fell. A little before the play ended, the man next to Sanshiro said to the man next to him that the actors all spoke as if they were having a nice family chat in the living room. They were utterly undisciplined. His neighbor responded with the criticism that none of the actors knew how to stand still. They were all fidgeting. The two men knew the actor's name. Sanshiro listened closely to their conversation. Both men were handsomely dressed. He thought they must be famous. He felt certain, however, that if he could let Yojiro hear their remarks, he would disagree with them. Just then, a man in the rear shouted his approval like some kabuki clerk. The two men looked around. After that, they stopped talking. Then the curtain fell. Here and there, spectators left their seats. From the stage ramp to the exit, a great milling of people began. Sanshiro raised himself slightly and in this uneasy crouch looked all around. There was no sign of the one he had hoped to see here. He had done his best during the performance to hunt her out. When that had failed, he had counted on finding her between plays, and now he was a little disappointed. All he could do was face front again. The two next to him appeared to be men of broad acquaintance. Turning right and left, they produced a steady stream of famous names. Over there was so and so, and over here was such and such. They exchanged bows across the hall with one or two. Thanks to them, Sanshiro learned who were the wives of a few famous men. One was a recent bride whom Sanshiro's neighbor was seeing for the first time. Apparently, he went to the trouble of wiping his glasses and looked at her, saying, "Oh yes, oh yes." Just then, Yojiro was scurrying across the front of the curtain stage, stopping about 2/3 of the way towards Sanshiro's end. He bent over slightly and started talking to the audience. Sanshiro allowed his line of vision, and there, several yards directly ahead of Yojiro, was Mineko in profile. The man next to her had his back to Sanshiro, who kept wishing that something would cause the man to look up in his direction. Almost in response, the man stood up, probably tired of sitting cross-legged in the matted box. He sat on the railing and looked all around the theater. It was then that Sanshiro recognized the broad forehead and large eyes of NatsumeSōseki. As Nonomiya stood up, Sanshiro caught sight of Yoshiko behind Mineko. He tried to ascertain if there was anyone else in the party, but the audience was packed together so tightly that from distance everyone in the front theater might as well have been with them. Mineko and Yojiro appeared to be exchanging remarks from time to time. Nonomiya also seemed to contribute an occasional word or two. Suddenly, Haraguchi came out through the curtain. He stood next to Yojiro and stared into the audience. He too was probably moving his mouth. Nonomiya nodded as if in signal, and Haraguchi slapped Yojiro on the back. Yojiro spun around and, diving under the curtain, disappeared. Haraguchi came down from the stage and made his way through the crowd to Nonomiya, who straightened up and let him go by. Haraguchi plunged into the crowd and disappeared somewhere near Mineko and Yoshiko. Sanshiro, who had been watching every movement of this group with far greater interest than he had experienced in watching the play, suddenly felt envious of this Haraguchi style of doing things. It had never occurred to him that one could approach people in such a convenient way. Perhaps he ought to try imitating Haraguchi, but the very consciousness that it would have been an imitation destroyed whatever courage he might have had to try. Further restrained for the unlikelihood of there being any space left into which he might wedge himself, Sanshiro stayed where he was. Soon the curtain rose again, and Hamlet started. Once at Professor Hirota's, Sanshiro seen a photograph of a famous Western actor dressed as Hamlet. The Hamlet that appeared before him now was in much the same costume as the one. The faces, too, were familiar. Both had brows knitted in anguish. The movement of this Hamlet were wonderfully nimble. He moved grandly across the stage and imparted some movement to the others. This was vastly different from Iruka's restrained no style, especially when he stood in the middle of the stage, stretching his arms out in the white or glaring at the sky. He aroused such excitement that the spectators were conscious of nothing but him. The dialogue, however, was in Japanese, translated Japanese spoken with exaggerated intonations, unusual rhythms. It poured forth so fluently at times it seemed almost too eloquent. It was in a fine literary style, but it was not moving. Sanshiro wished that Hamlet would say something a little more characteristically Japanese, where he expected to say, "Mother, you must not do that. It is an affront to father's memory." Hamlet would suddenly bring in Apollo and someone who smoothed things over. Meanwhile, both mother and son looked ready to burst into tears. Sanshiro was only dimly aware of the inconsistency, however. The courage to pronounce the things absurd was not forthcoming. And so, whenever he tired of Hamlet, he would look at Mineko, and whenever Mineko was hidden behind someone, he would look at Hamlet. When Hamlet told Ophelia, "Get thee to the nunnery," Sanshiro thought of Professor Hirota. No one like Hamlet could possibly marry, the professor had said, which seemed true enough when you lingered over the poetry in the book, but on stage it seemed that Hamlet might just as well marry. After careful consideration, Sanshiro concluded that this was because the line "get thee to a nunnery" was no good. The proof of this was that even after Hamlet had said to Ophelia, "You didn't feel sorry for her." The curtain came down again. Mineko and Nishiko went out, and Sanshiro followed their lead. When he reached the corridor, he saw them farther down, talking to a man who stood half inside the door that opened into the corridor from the left-hand seat. Sanshiro drew back as soon as he saw the man's profile. Instead of returning to his seat, he reclaimed his shoes and left the theater.
Wow! Talking about Ophelia came out of nowhere. Come, have a seat. We're just talking about Ophelia in Hamlet.
And you're here, Ophelia.
It's awesome. The Night in its true form. Just so you know, we are reading Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki, chapter 12. We only have chapter 12 and chapter 13 to go through, and then we are ending the book today. Okay? The night in its true form was dark. Passing beyond this place illuminated by the power of man, he thought he could feel an occasional drop of rain. The wind sighed in the tree. Sanshiro hurried back to his room. Oh my god, he's such a coward. Sorry. The rain came late at night. Listening to it in bed, Sanshiro made "Get thee to a nunnery" into a pillar and wandered round and round it. Professor Hirota might also be awake. What kind of pillar would he be embracing? And Yojiro was so sure to be out cold, buried in his great darkness. Sanshiro ran a slight fever the next day. His head felt so heavy he stayed in his futon, sitting up amid the still spread out bed to eat his lunch. After another nap, he woke perspiring, his mind in a fog. At that point, Yojiro charged in. He had not seen Sanshiro at the theater last night or in the class this morning. What was wrong? Sanshiro thanked him for coming. But I was there last night. I was there. I saw you come onto the stage and talk to Mineko out in the audience. Sanshiro was feeling a little dizzy. Once he started talking, the words slipped out of him. Yojiro pressed his hand to Sanshiro's forehead. You've got a real fever. You need some medicine. This is bad cold. The theater was too hot and too bright, and outside all of a sudden it was too cold and too dark. It's not good for you. Maybe it's not good for you, but there's nothing you can do about it. Maybe there's nothing you can do about it, but it's still not good for you. Sanshiro spoke in ever shorter snatches, and while Yojiro was humoring him, he fell asleep. He opened his eyes again in an hour later. You're still here? He said when he saw Yojiro. Now he was his normal self. Yojiro asked how he was feeling. He said only that he felt heavy in the head. Must be cold. Must be cold, they agreed at one point. A moment later, Sanshiro said, Remember the other day, you asked me if I had heard about Mineko. Mineko? Where? At school. At school when? Yojiro could not seem to remember. Sanshiro had to go into detail. Oh sure, I might have mentioned something like that to you, Yojiro said. Sanshiro found him highly irresponsible. Yojiro himself had a twinge of conscience, twinge of conscience, and did his best to recall the day for his friend. Finally, he said, Maybe that was it. Maybe I was going to tell you that Mineko is getting married. Oh God. Mineko is getting married. Starlight, what do we do?
Are you gonna cry? Were you shipping Sanshiro and Mineko? It's never meant to be. I knew it's never meant to be. He's too much of a coward. Oh, I really, I really cried. Is it definite? It was when I heard it. I'm not sure. Nonomiya? No, it's not Nonomiya. Then it must be... He started to say and stopped. Do you know who is it? No, he declared. Yojiro moved a little closer to him. I don't understand exactly, but something weird is going on. I guess it will be a while before we know what is it. Sanshiro wished Yojiro would come out with the weird something, but Yojiro blithely kept his view of the situation and the weirdness to himself. Sanshiro stood it as long as he could, but finally he demanded that Yojiro tell him every last thing he knew about Mineko. Yojiro laughed, and then, perhaps to comfort Sanshiro, he turned the subject into a wholly new direction. You are crazy to fall in love with a woman like Mineko. It's hopeless. First of all, she's the same age as you. Women don't go for men their own age anymore, not since Oshichi, the greengrocer's daughter. Sanshiro kept silent, but he had no idea what Yojiro was talking about. Now let me tell you what. Put a 20-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman side by side, and what have you got? She's got the upper hand in everything. He looks like a fool. No woman wants to marry a man she cannot respect. Except maybe a woman who thinks she's the greatest thing in the world. She has to marry an inferior man or live single. You've heard how often that happens with rich girls and such. They're happy enough to get married, but they end up looking down on their husband. Well, Mineko is a lot better than that. She would never marry a man she cannot respect. Anyone who thinks he's going to marry her had better realize that. Which is why guys like you and me don't qualify to be her husband. So Sanshiro ended up in the same camp as Yojiro. Still, he remained silent. Look at it this way. Both of us are way ahead of Mineko right now, you and me, just the way we are. But she won't be able to see that until another 5 or 6 years go by. Of course, she's not going to sit around waiting for that long. So you've got as much chance of getting together with her as a horse and a cow in heat. Yojiro chuckled to himself over that one. To think about it, another 5 or 6 years and there will be way better women than Mineko. The women outnumber the men in Japan even now. It's no use catching a cold and running a fever over one of them. I mean, there's a world full of women out there. It's not worth the worry. Tell you the truth, I've got a few myself, and one of them was giving me so much trouble I told her I had to go to Nagasaki on official business. What are you talking about? What do you mean what I'm talking about? A woman of mine? Sanshiro was astonished. Well, she's not the kind of woman you've ever gotten close to. Anyhow, I told her I had to go to Nagasaki for a bacteria test and I wouldn't be able to see her for a while, but she said she would bring me some apples when she come to the station to see me off. I didn't know what to do. Sanshiro was more and more astonished, but he managed to ask, so what happened to her? I don't know. She's probably waiting at the station with her apples. You rat! How could you do such a rotten thing? Yes, I know it's rotten and she didn't deserve it, but I didn't know what else to do. Fate just kept moving. Fate just kept moving that way, one small step at a time. Actually, I was a medical student from early on. Why did you have to lie to her? I don't know. It just sort of happened. It got me in trouble one time though. She got sick and asked me to examine her. Sanshiro was beginning to see the humor in all of this. I looked at her tongue, tapped out her chest, gave her this phony doctorate. So far so good. But then she asked me if I could give her a thorough examination in the hospital. Sanshiro finally burst out laughing. So don't worry. These things happen all the time, Yojiro concluded. Sanshiro had no idea what this supposed to mean, but he was feeling happy now. Yojiro chose this moment to explain the weird something about Mineko. Both Yoshiko and Mineko, he said, had received proposals of marriage.
That in itself was nothing special, but it was apparently the same man in both cases. That's what was weird. Sanshiro too found it somewhat mystifying, but the Yoshiko part at least was true. He had heard it with his own ears. He might have been confusing Mineko with Yoshiko's, but Mineko's marriage was no lie either, it seemed. He wanted to know the facts, and since Yojiro was there, it was Yojiro he asked for them. Yojiro agreed without hesitation. He would have asked Yoshiko to pay a sick call, he said, and Sanshiro could have asked her directly. An excellent solution. So you'll have to take your medicine and wait here in bed. I will, even if my cold clears up. They laughed and Yojiro went out. On the way home, he arranged for a doctor to visit Sanshiro. The doctor came that evening. Sanshiro was a little flustered at first, never having received a doctor by himself before, but the man wasted no time in taking his pulse, and this calmed him down. The doctor was a polite young man. Sanshiro thought he must be a medical assistant. Within 5 minutes, his illness was diagnosed as influenza. He was ordered to take this single dose of medicine that night and avoid drafts. Much of the heavy feeling in his head was gone when he awoke the next day. Lying in bed, he felt practically normal. Away from the pillow, however, he was unsteady. The maid came and said the room smelled of fever. Sanshiro ate nothing but lay looking at the ceiling. He dozed off now and then, and he clearly surrendered himself to fever and exhaustion. While he remained in their power unresisting, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, he found a certain pleasure in submitting to nature. This was how he decided, because his illness was a minor one. When 4 hours, then 5 hours had gone by, he began to feel the tedium. He tossed back and forth. Outside, it was a lovely day. The sun moved shadows slowly across the shoji's translucent paper. Sparrows chirped. Sanshiro hoped that Yojiro would come by again today. The maid slid back the shoji, announced the arrival of a lady guest. He had not been expecting Yoshiko to come so soon. Yojiro had done his job with typical dispatch. Sanshiro lay in bed, eyes fixed onto the open doorway, when at last a tall figure appeared at the threshold. She was wearing a purple divided skirt today. Standing in the hallway, she seemed a little hesitant to enter. Sanshiro raised his shoulders from the mattress and said, "Come in." Yoshiko closed the shoji and sat down near his pillow. The small room was a jumble and seemed all the more cramped for not having been cleaned this morning. Don't bother to get up," she said to him. Sanshiro rested his head on the pillow again. As far as he could tell, he was calm. "It must smell bad in here." "Yes, a little," she answered, but her face expressed no discomfort. "Do you have a fever? What's wrong with you? Has the doctor been to see you?" "The doctor came last night. He said it's influenza. Yojiro came early this morning and told me to make a sick call. He said he didn't know what you had and that it looked serious." Mineko and I were both shocked. Yojiro had been stretching the truth again. He might even be said to have lured Yoshiko out under false pretenses. Sanshiro was too good to not feel bad about this. He thanked her for her concern. Yoshiko untied a cloth wrapper from a basket of mandarin oranges. "Mineko suggested I buy this on the way," she said frankly. He couldn't be sure whose gift it was. He thanked Yoshiko and let it go at that. Mineko was supposed to come, but she's a bit busy these days. She sends her regard. "Has something special come up to make her so busy?" "Yes, something very special." Her large eyes fell on Sanshiro where he lay, head propped up on his pillow. He looked up at her pale forehead and thought of the long time ago when he had first met her in the hospital. Even now, she appeared languid and at the same time vivacious. She brought to Sanshiro's sickbed a total comfort in which he could place his trust. "Shall I peel an orange for you?" She drew a fruit from the mask of green leaves. In his thirst, he drank deeply of the sweet dew, its fragrance overflowing.
I'm sure they are delicious. They're from Mineko. I've had enough. She brought a white handkerchief from her sleeve and wiped her hand. Yoshiko, whatever happened to that marriage proposal? Nothing. That was the end of it. I heard there was one for Mineko too. Yes, it's all settled. Who is the man? The man who asked for me. Isn't it funny? He's a friend of Mineko's brother. Soon I'll be living in the house with my brother again. I can hardly stay in the Satomis after Mineko's gone. Won't you be getting married? I will, if there's a man I want to marry. She wrapped the subject up neatly with a hearty laugh. There was no one she wanted to marry now, that was certain. Sanshiro stayed in bed for 4 more days, and on the 5th he risked a bath and looked at himself in the mirror. Not bad for a corpse. The sight spurred him on to the barber's. The next day was Sunday. After breakfast he dressed to ward off the cold, and with 2 undershirts and an overcoat, and went to Mineko's. Yoshiko was in the hallway preparing to step down into her sandals. She's about to leave for her brother's, she said. Mineko was out. He accompanied Yoshiko as far as the street. Have you recovered completely? Yes, I'm fine now, thanks. I'm hoping to see Kyosuke? No, Mineko. She's gone to the church. This was the first time he had heard of Mineko being a churchgoer. He asked Yoshiko for directions as they parted. Turning 3 corners, he came out in the front of the church. Sanshiro had never heard anything to do with the Jesus religion and had never seen the inside of a church. He stood out front and looked in at the building. He read the placard announcing the sermon. He walked back and forth inside the iron fence, sometimes leaned against it. He was determined to wait there until Mineko came out. Eventually, he heard singing. This must be what they call a hymn, he thought. It was something that happened inside high, sealed windows. Judging from the volume, there were a good many people singing. Mineko must be one of the voices he was hearing now. Sanshiro listened closely. The singing stopped. The wind blew. Sanshiro turned up the collar of his overcoat. One of Mineko's clouds appeared in the sky. Once he had looked at the autumn sky with Mineko. They had been upstairs at Professor Hirota's. Once he had sat by the little stream in the fields. He had not been alone that time either. Stray sheep. The cloud had taken form of a sheep. Suddenly the church door opened. People came out. Returning from the paradise to the fleeting world of man, Mineko was fourth from the last. She wore a striped ankle-length coat. Her head was bowed as she came down the front staircase. She seemed to be feeling the cold. With her shoulders hunched and her hands clasped before her, she was doing her best to minimize contact with the outside world. Mineko maintained this air of rising to nothing until she reached the gate. As if only then, aware of the rush of the street, she looked up. The dark image of the cab in Sanshiro's hand registered in her eyes. The 2 young people moved together by the sermon placard. Is something the matter? I just dropped by your house. Oh, well, let's go back there. She began to turn away. She wore the same low cloak she always wore. Instead of following her, Sanshiro edged against the church fence. I just wanted to see you here for a minute. I've been waiting for you to come out. You should have come inside. You must have been cold. I was. Is your cold all better now? You could have relapsed if you're not careful. You still look a little pale. He didn't answer, but instead took a small packet wrapped in writing paper from his overcoat. It's the money I borrowed from you. Thanks very much. I've been meaning to give it back to you for a long time now. I'm sorry I let it go. Mineko glanced at Sanshiro, but she took the packet without protest. Once it was in her hand, though, she simply looked at it. Sanshiro looked at it too. For a few moments they said nothing. Finally, Mineko spoke. Are you sure you don't need this? No, I had it sent from home a while ago for this very reason. Please take it. I see. Well then I will. She put the packet in the breast of her coat. She withdrew her hand. She was holding a white handkerchief. She pressed it to her face, looking at Sanshiro. She might have been inhaling something in the cloth. All at once, she held it out. The handkerchief came before Sanshiro's face. A sharp fragrance poured from it. "Heliotrope," she said softly. Sanshiro jerked his head back. The bottle of heliotrope. The evening in Yonchome. Stray sheep, stray sheep. In the sky, the high sun shone bright and clear. "I heard you're getting married." Mineko dropped the handkerchief into her sleeve. "You know?" she said, narrowing her softly creased eyelids to look at Sanshiro. She had placed him at a distance. Her eyes were telling him, but now she was sorrier than she ought to be. The concern did not show in her brows, however, which maintained an undeniable calm. Sanshiro's tongue became glued to the roof of his mouth. After she had looked at him for a while, Mineko released an almost inaudible sigh. And finally, touching a slender hand to her rich eyebrow, she murmured, "For I acknowledged my transgression, and my sin is ever before me." She spoke almost too softly to be heard, but Sanshiro heard her distinctly. It was thus that Sanshiro and Mineko parted. When he came back to his room, he found a telegram from his mother. "When do you leave?" it said.
That was chapter 12, and we are ending Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki with chapter 13 right now. A sip of tea for this sad tale of Sanshiro. Chapter 13. Haraguchi's painting was finished. The Tanseikai hung it on the main wall of one gallery. In front of the painting they set a long bench. It was for resting. It was also for looking at the painting. It was for both resting and appreciation. The Tanseikai thus catered for the convenience of the many spectators who would linger by this major work. This was a special treatment. It was, they said, because the painting was a special accomplishment. Some said it was because the title attracted people's notice. A few said it was because of the woman in the picture. One or two of the Tanseikai members explained that it was simply because the painting was so big. And big it certainly was. It was in its new 6-inch wide gold frame. It looked big enough to be taken for a whole new painting. Haraguchi stopped in the day before the opening to inspect his work. He sat on the bench and looked at it for a long time, smoking his pipe. Finally, he sprang to his feet and made a careful circuit of the show. Then he returned to the bench and smoked a second leisurely pipeful. Crowds gathered before Woman in Forest. From the day the show opened, the bench turned out to be a useless ornament, although tired spectators would sit there in order not to see the picture. But even while they rested, some exchanged views on Woman in Forest. Mineko's husband brought her to the show on the second day. Haraguchi was their guide. When they came to Woman in Forest, Haraguchi looked at the couple and asked, "How do you like it?" "Excellent," the husband said, fixing his gaze on it from behind his glasses. This standing pose, holding up the round fan, is especially fine. The eye of a professional does see things differently after all. Who else could have thought of this? The light on the face is beautifully done. The contrast between shadow and sunlight is distinct. The face alone is full of extraordinarily interesting modulations. "I'm afraid I can't take credit for it," Haraguchi said. "The subject herself wanted it this way." "Thank you very much," Mineko said. "And let me thank you," Haraguchi answered. Mineko's husband looked very pleased to hear that the idea for the picture had been his wife's. The thanks he expressed were the most gracious of all.
After midday on the first Saturday following the opening, Professor Hirota, Nonomiya, Yojiro, and Sanshiro all came to the exhibition together, leaving the rest for later. The four of them went straight to see Woman in Forest. That's it, said Yojiro. A crowd stood in front of the painting. Sanshiro hesitated for a moment in the doorway. Nonomiya calmly strolled in. Sanshiro glanced at the painting once more from behind the crowd and turned away. He leaned against the bench, waiting for the others. What a big, beautiful painting! Yojiro exclaimed. Haraguchi tells me he wants you to buy it, Professor Hirota said to him. I'm not the one, he started to say until he noticed Sanshiro leaning against the bench, scowling. His use of color is very stylish. It's rather chic. This was Nonomiya's critical opinion. Professor Hirota then offered this. It's almost too cleverly done. Now I see why he confessed he could never do a painting that plops like a drum. Plops like a drum? What kind of painting is that? Nonomiya asked. One that's pleasantly half-witted like plop of a little no drum. An interesting sort of painting. The two of them laughed. They discussed only techniques, but Yojiro had his own views. Nobody could paint Mineko looking pleasantly half-witted. Nonomiya shoved his hand in his pocket, looking for a pencil with which to mark the catalogue. Instead, he came out with a printed card. It was an invitation to Mineko's wedding reception. Nonomiya and Professor Hirota had gone in their frock coats. Sanshiro had found an invitation on his desk the day he came back to Tokyo. The wedding had already taken place. Nonomiya tore the invitation apart and threw it on the floor. Soon, he and Professor Hirota became involved in criticizing the other paintings. Yojiro moved closer to Sanshiro. How do you like Woman in Forest? The title is no good. What should it be then? Sanshiro did not answer him, but to himself he muttered over and over, Stray ship, stray ship. And that is the end of chapter 13, the last chapter of Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. We're done! We are done. We are done with Sanshiro. What do you guys think? I think the whole thing reeks of regret. Regrets of not saying, not responding, not saying things when he's supposed to say, not responding to her when she's expecting him to respond. I think she made it very fucking clear that she likes him, but he kept doubting it. Like, he kept questioning it. Like, is she interested in me? Is she really interested in me? Does she really like me? But she actually made a lot of moves on him, you know. And yeah, that's like, even from the, yes, exactly, it's just, yeah, he's just gonna be the professor basically. And then in years on and like, he was just gonna stay. But you see, Hirota wasn't really bitter. Like, he doesn't exude bitterness for not being able to marry or marrying the girl that he said that he could probably marry at that time. I feel like Sanshiro is turning out quite bitter. Sanshiro is basically, I'm sorry to say, but Sanshiro at this point when you know, the girl of his dream is married, and the regrets that he's feeling for not making any move and everything like that at at the right time. His regrets is making him quite like a bit of an incel. Sorry. um yeah, but Hirota, Professor Hirota doesn't seem like an incel. He just like just have no, he just doesn't care about marriage that much at all. Yeah, but Sanshiro seems very bitter with the stray ship thing. And the whole stray ship thing, right? Well, this girl drew a picture of two ships in the hill and sent a postcard to you. What more do you need from her to tell you that I like you? Right? And he didn't even, to the end, if you can recall, until the end, he never responded to the postcard. Like he met her, and then she even say, "Hey, you didn't respond to my postcard," and then he said, "Yeah, I'm going to respond to you," but he never responded to the postcard. That's why stray ships keeps coming to his mind. He's regretting this so badly. You know, it was so painfully, yeah, Starlight, yeah, it was so painfully obvious that this girl liked him, but he's like, I don't know, I'm not sure. But he just never respond to anything that she's like dropping hints like fucking tsunami, and he's still like, I don't know. Am I drowning? No, I don't know. Like he's like, oh my god, Jesus, what else do you want? Suck your dick, like, you know? I'm sorry to go that far, but like, like what else do you need at that time and point? It's like fucking 1900s. You know, the girl is already being very bold at that point. Like seriously, you never responded to her postcard. And she kept saying, no, you don't have to give me back the money. You don't have to give me back the money. You know why? You know why she said that? Because it's like, one day your money is my money is your money. It's okay. And she's like, no, take this money back. I don't want your money. It's like, oh my god. Sanshiro. Bruh. Seriously. Oh wow. Wait, did you take a picture? Hang on. Tomates. Oh my god! Seriously. Thank you! Jesus! Oh my god! Wow! Thank you! Holy shit. Is that how you imagine I look like? I don't look like that at all. But very good rendition. That's amazing. Are you studying art? That's beautiful. Thank you so much. You should post it in my Discord. That's really nice. Thank you so much. Oh god. It's really nice. I'm going to post it on Twitter and credit you. Are you following me on are you following me on Twitter? Because I want to. Well, that's amazing. You are very good. Seriously, you are very, very good at drawing. Seriously. That's really nice. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, your FF name is, oh, okay. I'll I'll credit you and I'll post it on my Twitter, okay? Thank you so much. Ophelia. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while, Ophelia. You've been busy? I've been busy too. I haven't like streamed for weeks on ends. Like now I'm trying to like get busy again. So okay. So I don't know how many of you are in my Twitch right now. I don't really know, but okay. So we have finished Sanshiro by NatsumeSōseki. So usually I don't really want to like I want to read like consecutive author books. So the next book that I'm gonna read is um, Kazuo Ishiguro's very very classic Never Let Me Go. Have you guys watched the movie? Just curious.
The movie is really good.
Twisty, we should watch the movie. I don't know if Twisty is still there. We should watch the movie. It's really good. God.
Yeah, I've been kind of busy too. That's why I haven't.
I'm not just busy. Like I think the lack of motivation to even like stream. I feel. I guess. I don't know. I kind of.
I don't know. I need the motivation to do it.
Yeah. And yeah. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you for being here. Can I add you to my friend list, Starlight? I'm gonna send a friend request in stream so that you cannot say no. Haha. Ha 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 ha. Trapping you here. Okay, so I don't know if you are seeing the chat in my like Starlight. You said you felt like you are missing out on some funny thing. It's not that funny really. A few years ago, I worked at a place where I worked very closely with this Japanese dude, and he was like in his late 30s at that time. Now he's like in his early 40s, and he's still single, and he's like he's very funny because he's from Osaka. I think Osaka people is just not generally naturally funny. Yeah, we should watch it, Twisty. Never Let Me Go. Um, and that like just his funniness sometimes just comes out in the way he speaks, and I could impersonate him very well for that 1 year I worked with him. And yeah, like Twisty said in the chat that okay, so the place that I work at is a hair salon. Okay, so he's a hairstylist, and he's actually a guy who actually likes his job very well. So he really likes doing haircuts. Like, you know, cutting hair is like he just likes cutting hair. And another thing that he likes is Big Macs. Like one of the things that I would do for them is like run around and get lunch for everyone. And if on a good day and he wanted to like treat everyone to lunch, and he will be like, let's have McDonald's, and then I'll ask him, what do you want? And he will be like, I want Big Mac, and then the big one. I know it's not funny at all, but it was like, it's really funny now that like back then it was really funny. I could do a very good impersonation of his voice and his cadence. Not anymore, because I really don't remember. I really don't remember him that well anymore. Like I really don't remember how he spoke anymore. Seriously, like for that 1 year I worked with him, I could like just like mime him very well. So it was like kind of a source of like joke between me and Twisty, that we just like we just fucking like, you know, yeah. I'll just come home from work and I'll tell like Twisty like, this stupid dude said this stupid thing today, and then I would like do it in his voice, and Twisty would laugh. So yeah, it's just stupid shit. It's not that funny. But yeah, he would say like, big one, Big Mac, I want Big Mac, the big one, something like that. I don't know if I'm doing it right. I don't think I'm doing it right anymore. I sincerely do not remember how I do it, how I used to do his voice anymore. Yeah. Well, Twisty, we have a lot of movies we need to watch. Seriously. Yeah. Anyway. So the next book will be Never Let Me Go. I don't know if you guys watched the movie before, but the book itself is very, 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 like, seriously really good. Like, I think it's even better than Remains of the Day. Like, Remains of the Day is really good, seriously. But Never Let Me Go is just like there's this twinge of nostalgic when was the last time I saw him? The last time I saw him was last year. Because he moved to Singapore, and I stayed friends with some people from the hair salon that I worked at, but I never stayed friends with him because we were never really friends. It's more like he's my boss kind of thing. So the last time I saw him was last year when I went to Singapore to hang out for work, and also like try to meet up with my friend who also went to Singapore, working along with him, and then I went to the hair salon, and my friend asked my friend to do like a hair wash for me and all that, and trim my hair a little bit, and that's when I saw him last. That was August, I think, August of last year. But before that, before the August of last year, I didn't see him. I never met him for 4 years, 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I didn't. Yeah, never didn't see that guy for 4 or 5 years. That's why I cannot remember anymore. And I barely spoke to him last year when I saw him. So like seriously, I cannot do his voice anymore. I can't mime his voice anymore. Yeah, it's not fun. That's why it's not funny anymore. It just became an inside joke now. That's just like, oh, I want a Big Mac, a big one. Yeah. Anyways, oh my god. Never Let Me Go. I have to. The fonts, I'll tell you this, the fonts on this book is so small and the book is so long. And I got this book like a really long time ago. I don't know the date. Like, okay, wait. January of 2006, I believe I got this book. And that's insane. Is it January? Can't be. It cannot be. I don't think so. I got it on 2006 because okay. There's like several geography thing that I would say why I couldn't have gotten the book. I think I gotten the book around 2010 or something. Yeah, I think the date on this thing is like the printed on this price tag is a date that this book is printed or something, or the book that the date that they received the book or something like that. But you see what? Okay, so I actually read it first before I watched it. But there are books that I watch the movie first and then I read it. Like I know there is this movie, and then I sort out the book, and then I read the book first, then I watch the movie. Because I torrent all my movies. So I can decide to watch anytime I want. Anyway, I'm just very surprised to look at the price tag of this book. It's so cheap. Books back then were so cheap. Books nowadays are so expensive. This book now I think probably is gonna sell for like fucking double the price that I paid for back then. You can, if you I don't know, you can decide whether you want to watch the movie first or read the book first. It really doesn't matter, because the screenplay for Never Let Me Go is written by Kazuo Ishiguro anyway, so it's like his vision. Regardless of the book, if there's changes from the book or no changes from the book, which I won't spoil for you all, is that it's Kazuo Ishiguro's vision anyway, because it's his screenplay. So if he changed something, that means the changes that he made is something that he wanted to do to fit into a movie better than in a book, because there are some scenes or some ideas that, like, works in a book doesn't necessarily work in a movie. So sometimes like a script doctor is required when it comes to like an adaptation. And I feel the movie and the acting and the screenplay all did excellently, like really good and very faithful to the book. It's just presented differently, slightly differently on the book and on the big screen, basically. Since I have some time, we can like chit chat for a little bit while I try to separate the book into readable days. I am pretty sure that Never Let Me Go is going to take me 4 days of reading instead of three, the usual three, because it's okay. It goes by part. Okay, Kazuo Ishikuro's writing is holy shit. Like he's I'm not going to critique his pace or anything, but it's more like he has like part one. He likes to have parts to his books, to his story. Sorry, I keep sorry, I keep burping because I haven't eaten yet. That's why I think. So he keeps like separating them into like parts. So okay, so you see right now there's part one for. Is it like a kind of play? No. It's a movie. I don't know if you're talking about the book or the what. Okay, so chapter 1. Part 1, chapter 1. Oh, the fonts on this one is it's very small. So I really think that this is going to take me a long fucking time to read. Chapter 3. Chapter 1. I know people like hate to dog ear their books, but I honestly do not give a shit. I dog ear a book is like there's like some passage or some paragraphs that I really like that I would like to reread. So usually I dog ear it. But yeah, I have like borrowed books from friends who like, please don't dog ear my book. Yeah. Speaking of which, I really should go and return all the books that I borrowed from my friend. It's not like a play. I don't want to spoil you guys. It's a very good story. That's all I can say. Yeah, it's a very good story. It's like seriously really good. Like it's definitely one that's like really like stick in my heart a lot, and it's very very good. I don't know how to explain it. It's just really good. Like I don't know how to like. This is why I never want to try to convince people to read a book, because I could never tell like, how do I convince someone to read a book if I don't tell them like what part in the book that I like, right? So that's the problem for me, at least. So I really do try my best not to. Wow, part 2. Okay, so yeah, I think, oh my god, I really think that this is going to take 2 days of reading, 4 days of reading, at least 4 days of reading, I'm pretty sure. Okay, now I reach part 2. So part 1 has 9 chapters. So in 9 chapters, I'm going to divide into chapter 1 to chapter 4, chapter 5 to chapter 9, like I did with yeah, even that, right? I think this is going to be like insanely long. Like, I'm serious. It's gonna be insanely long. That's all I can say. I have sticky notes too. Yeah. I have the little sticky notes. I'm using that to like, but I don't want to waste too much sticky notes that I just dog ear them. Because it's my book. I don't care. I don't care how it's like. You know? A well-used little book means so much more to me than, like, being worried that, oh, my book is dog-eared stuff. I'm not a person who look for perfection in life. I think that is a very telling thing. Wow, shit, this is gonna be hell. I don't want to say it like that, but it's like, this is really gonna be hell, I feel. The reading of this is going to be insane. I'm gonna play up. I'm not going. No, I'm not gonna play up with accent because I'm not good with accent. Chapter 14, chapter 15, chapter 14, 15. My phone ringing? No. Sorry. Let me see. Is it? Wow. Chotto mate. 1, 2, then like this. Wow. Like if I read it alone, like, and I don't dog ear my book if I like read it myself, because I tend to read a book at one go. That's why I just like for like 6 hours or something, I'll just sit there and like finish the entire book. And I read really fucking fast. Like insanely fast. Yeah, I read really fast. If I don't read it out loud myself, basically. So wow, holy shit. Part 3. See, he really likes doing his parts, man. Chapter 18. It's a great book. Seriously. I don't know. This is babbling right now. Okay, you guys can ask me anything. AMA. While I'm doing this dog earring thing. AMA. Wow, holy shit, what the fuck is this? Why? I didn't realize it's this bad. Not bad, I mean, like this long-winded when I was reading it to myself. And then there are some chapters that's just like 2 pages long, and then there are like other chapters that's like fucking 20 pages long. It's fucking insane, I'm telling you. Come on. 23. You guys can ask me anything, I'll try my best to answer it. Ooh, okay. So chapter 23 is the end. So what I need to do is... Wow, okay, hang on. So... God, this is hell. Okay, so... Chapter 1, chapter 5, chapter 5 to chapter... 9. Okay. So... Chapter 10 to chapter 15. Chapter 10 to chapter 15. Chapter... I think I can finish up chapter 15. And then chapter 16 onwards. 16. conclusion to that story? Nothing. I just laughed at it because I was quite drunk at that time. Yeah, and then I go home. Is that good enough? Someone stole my hat. I guess Twisty. Who's my mod? Yeah. Yeah, he's not just my mod. he's he's my sim too, I guess. Hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chapter 16, 17, 18. Part 3, chapter 18. Wow, this is difficult to divide. 16. I might have to do a marathon on the last part, or I can move it a bit. I think I have to move it like one chapter in. So chapter 1 to chapter 5, chapter 6 to chapter 11. Okay, chapter 11. Okay, and then chapter 11 to chapter 16. Chapter 11 can do until chapter 17, I suppose. Chapter 17. 17 chapter, and then part 3, and then I finished there, and then part 3 would be quite a marathon. I'm going to read part 3 at one go, basically, which is going to be hell, I feel, but I think it's doable. I think it's doable. Part 3 is doable. If I read the entire part 3 at one go, I think it's doable. It's gonna be difficult because it's very long, but I think it's doable. So so I'm gonna read it 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. What is this? Okay, 1 day. Oh, so fuck. Oh my god. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, and 4 days. Okay, yeah, it's a 4 days work. Yep. It's a 4 days work. So 4 days work. Fine. That should be fine. That's alright. I'm not gonna die from reading books. Alrighty. I have separated it into 4 days. So it'll be very interesting. I really like this book. Yeah. So if you guys don't know anything about Kazuo Ishiguro, he's my second most favorite author. But he's more English than Japanese, to be honest. He has written books like with Japanese theme, but his British theme books are a lot better. He has this like very dry British humor. So Kazuo Ishiguro was born in Nagasaki, Japan in 1954 and came to Britain at the age of 5. That's why he is definitely more English than Japanese. He's the author of, at the time of Never Let Me Go publishing, he's the author of 6 novels, A Pale Veil of Heels. I have read that. You can check out my VODs. An Artist of the Floating World. I've also have fought for that, and miraculously, on my YouTube, the first reading of an Artist of the Floating World has like fucking 3.9k views right now. I don't know how it happened. The algorithm is like insane. But yes, I have fought for that. And then the Remains of Day, I also have fought for that. And then the Unconsoled, whom I didn't know of its existence until recently, but I bought the book already, so I have the Unconsoled ready at our dispense. When We Were Orphans, I believe I also have read that. I have fought for that. And then I think when We Were Orphan is the last Kazuo Ishiguro book I read on stream. So yeah. And then now, Never Let Me Go. We're gonna read Never Let Me Go. I wonder if it's like FF players or school students who have it assigned. Yeah, I believe that I saw some comments that said that, oh, thank you so much for doing this reading because it's on our high school literature thing or something like that. And it, like, by listening to me read it along when they are reading it, they felt like it's easier to understand, which is, I guess, makes sense, but I'm not sure because how I read last time for school is I just read it over and over again, but then I have a tendency to like record me reading it out loud so that I can check if my pronunciation is okay or not. That is what helped me on my reading. But other than that, right? Oh shit! My post. Oh, sorry, my bookmark. So yeah, apparently, I have a very different subset of people on YouTube who listen to my reading. They don't care about me. They don't care about what I talk about. They don't care my opinion about the book. They don't care who I am. They don't even care why am I doing this. But the subset of people on YouTube is that they are only focused on my reading of the book. Therefore, they would they would do things like timestamp when I start reading. So I feel really bad for them when I ramble on too much and before I start reading the book in the morning, like I tend to ramble, and then or I ramble a lot in the midst of like when I'm like reading halfway and I'm like, oh, like they never really say like, oh, can you please shut the fuck up or anything like that. But I have that feeling like they don't care about my opinion or my reaction or anything. They just want me to read the book. So I try my best not to like well, you know, the thing is, the reason why I started doing Noodibles is because I wanted it's okay. It's alright, fine, it's alright, it's fine, it's fine. Thank you for coming today. Thank you so much. Thank you. Go on, have fun. It's like what was I saying? I don't remember. Holy shit. My mind just went blank. But okay, the reason why I started Noodible is because I wanted to be someone else's background sound that is not music or movies or anything. Like I don't even mind if people don't listen to the story and understanding the story. I just wanted to be someone else's background sound. And personally I just enjoy reading anyways. And I've always wanted to like do something like this, and I always say that my manager is that Deanne. Deanne is not logged in right now because Deanne is taking a break from the game until like 6.5. So you won't see Deanne anytime soon. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes she just logs in whenever she wants. So I don't know. Like, but anyway, yeah. So Deanne is the one who told me to just do it on stream, and also make a make this avatar. I'll call it avatar. I'm not gonna say that it's a. I'm not gonna say it's a VTuber. It is a VTuber model, but I don't know. I don't consider myself a VTuber, cause I don't have like artworks. No, I'm not. I'm not a VTuber. I'm not technically people think that oh he's a VTuber, but I don't consider myself a VTuber because I don't have like I don't I don't advertise myself as a VTuber. I don't have like artwork that's like I don't have a what do you call it customized rig. I just use some stuff, some like commercial rig to make this. I don't have a customized rig. My character, my stream name and my character name in game is the fucking same. It's Ariana Nuna. Cause I'm too lazy to think about like like when I think about VTuber, right? I think about a personality of someone, a personality that's like a persona that is not. Yes, it's VRite Studio. Yes, that's correct. Um, I'm not a persona though. I'm just who I am. Like I feel like even I'm in game, when I'm playing in game, when I'm raiding in game, it's me. Uh, when yes, yes, my avatar is just myself basically. In real life, I wear glasses. I wear transparent frames. I have uh, purple hair. I actually do have purple hair in real life. The only thing difference is that I'm a lot chubbier than my avatar. Yeah, I'm a fat girl. No, it's just chubby, I guess. I don't. Yeah, I would like to look like my avatar, just so you know. But I don't. Uh, but yes, but in real life, I have purple hair and I wear glasses. Um, and I speak like just like this. I don't feel like I speak any differently in real life than I'm just myself. So that's why I say I don't feel comfortable claiming myself to be a VTuber because that's not my purpose in the first place. And also I don't have a persona. If I'm raiding, I'm raiding. I'm like I get angry and I yell and I you know and stuff. When I'm reading a book, I'm calm, and I mean, me raiding in this game, yelling, shouting, and making noises and just being angry or being excited. That's me. Me reading a book calmly. That's me too. So, there's no persona here. I don't have a persona. That's why I don't like to call myself a VTuber because I don't think myself as a VTuber. I don't have a persona. But a VTuber, they actually put in a lot of effort in creating their persona. Like they have their catchphrases and everything. I don't have anything like that. I'm not distinguishable as a VTuber. I don't think that because I'm not a VTuber. I'm just not distinguishable because I'm not a VTuber. Like the only thing that I would do with my like the only thing that I would say that's like very signaturely Ariana Nuna is this. This. Can you see? Red face on. Yeah, this is the only distinguishable thing when it comes to Ariana Nuna is that I have the red face on, the angry face on when I'm raiding in game. Other than that, yeah, exactly. VTubers are a lot of effort. I don't put in any effort, so I don't feel comfortable calling myself a a VTuber, because I feel like it's so unfair to those VTubers who actually put in effort to make a character, to make that to read their character, to create their character, how the character looks, to come up with like catchphrases or just very talented people. I feel like VTubers behind the scene is like a bunch of really talented people doing these things, and I'm just like one gal with Vroid Studio and a very cheap microphone. Really, like my microphone is like fucking $10, less than that. I feel it's fucking cheap ass shit that I've been using for more than 1 year. Yeah. So no, I don't. It's not that I look down on VTuber and that's why I don't want to be associated with VTuber. It's actually the opposite. VTuber is so much work. I don't want to be called a VTuber because I put zero effort into my non-persona, if you call it. I don't have a persona. My voice? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for liking my voice. I think my voice is the only thing that kept me. That's nice about me. I think my voice is the only thing that's nice. That's it. I don't have any other redeeming qualities. I only have a nice voice, and I'm not even a good singer. So, so yeah. I don't know. VTubers. I'm not a VTuber. I'm just an avatar. I'm just a person hiding behind an avatar. That's all. That's it. I am not a VTuber. VTubers is a very high level thing that I could never achieve. Yeah, I'm just who I am. I'm just Ariana Nuna, who do stupid, boring streams like reading session. I stream too. I stream MSQ. Yeah, I stream MSQs. And well, tell that to my therapist. That's all I can say. Style, I just said that. Don't think so negatively of myself. That is impossible. If I could not think negatively about myself, I wouldn't have to see a therapist. I had to see a therapist because I hate myself. Just so you know. I'm working on it, okay? Right? I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Trust me, it's okay. I'm working on it. Okay? I'm working on liking myself a little bit more every day. Or every session, I guess. Oh, God, I thought you just disappeared. Goodness. Don't worry. I'm okay. I'm emo sometimes. If I disappear for a while, it's probably because I'm like emoing about something, and like, you know, just wanted to go through quiet times. But if I'm like, no, it's okay. No, what the hell, masala chai? I don't like masala. Okay, it's okay. I'll take it. Thank you so much. I should make another cup of coffee because I need to eat my lunch. Anyways, yeah, I do other streams too. I play Yakuza, you know. I still haven't finished it. Hey, please lah! Stop it! Hey, stop it! Don't. No. Enough. my real accent just slipped out just now. Hey, if you caught it, you caught it, right? Okay, guys. Okay. Starlight, I'm gonna go and eat my lunch before I starve to death. So, I'll see you on Monday. We are definitely going to read on Monday. I promise. We are gonna read Kazuo Ishiguro's "Never Let Me Go." Okay? I'll see you guys on Monday. bagel? No, I ran out of bagel already. Yeah. I need to get more bagels. But I'm so lazy to get out of the house. I'm so lazy. Please help me. I'm so lazy. Anyways, I'm gonna go eat lunch. And thank you so much for joining my stream today. For those who are in my stream, to Twisty for help me moderating, and to Starlight for that amazing portrait you drew of me. Thank you so much. It's really nice. I really like it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I'll see you guys on Monday. Before I go, I'm gonna send you all off with my favorite song in the world. Hang on, where is it? Hell yeah.
Have you ever had a dream that you could know you could know you want to know
Alright, I'll see you guys on Monday. Until then, take care of yourself, eat well, stay healthy, go and have fun. It's Saturday. Tomorrow is Sunday. Go have fun. Go out and play. Don't stay in the game like me. I have 15,000 hours locked in this game, and it's not healthy. I'll see you guys soon. Bye. Thank you so much. I love you guys. Mwah, 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 mwah.